Tonight, we step into a colder, stranger version of the Harry Potter story. A world where the boy who lived never touched Privet Drive, where the neat little house at number 4 waited for a baby who would never arrive, because Voldemort took him first. In this world, the prophecy is not a death sentence. It is a recruitment notice. The Dark Lord does not hear one with the power to vanquish and think only of annihilation. He hears the outline of a weapon that might be shaped, honed, and turned upon the one wizard he truly fears. This is important. Instead of trying again to kill the child who survived Avada Kedavra, he makes a different plan. He will raise Harry Potter himself, and one day unleash him upon Albus Dumbledore. Canon gives us a gentler image. A quiet street under sodium orange lamps. A cat on a brick wall, watching as a giant of a man places a sleeping infant on a doorstep. A letter tucked carefully against a blanket. The night feels bruised but hopeful, as though magic and grief have reached a fragile truce. In that story, the grave in Godric's Hollow was empty of living presence. The danger had passed elsewhere, and the baby was carried away. Not here. Here, the grave was empty because no one ever buried the Dark Lord's greatest prize. No Dumbledore, who had intended to hide the child in plain sight among muggles. No Hagrid, who had flown through the air on Sirius Black's motorbike to deliver hope into an ordinary suburb. Not Sirius, who had sworn to be the boy's guardian and would have died to keep him free. In this version, the cottage at Godric's Hollow lies in the same ruin, the same blasted doorway, the same scorched crib. But amid the wreckage, a cloaked figure bends and lifts a crying infant from the rubble and does not let go. The scar still burns on Harry's forehead, but it is not a simple survival mark. It is a brand of ownership. From his first memories, the cold red eyes above him are not a nightmare to be fled, but the gaze of the man he is taught to call Father. The stories whispered to him in the dark do not paint Dumbledore as a savior. They paint him as the architect of war, the old manipulator who would have left Harry in a loveless cupboard, who would have used him and then cast him aside. What happens when a child grows up believing that? This is not a simple alignment swap, a neat inversion of good and evil. It is a life built under a deliberate charm of indoctrination, a childhood where Death Eaters become tutors and guards, where every lesson in magic is also a lesson in fear. Harry is alive, but he is not free. The boy who might have chased snitches over the Hogwarts pitch instead studies curses in hidden chambers, learning that mercy is weakness and love is a lie. In this story, we will follow him from crib to final confrontation. We will watch Hogwarts through his altered eyes, trace the prophecy as Voldemort interprets it, and see how Snape, Dumbledore, and even the Sorting Hat grapple with a Harry Potter forged to destroy the one wizard Voldemort cannot bear to face alone. And at the end, we will ask, when the weapon finally chooses its target, whose grave will stand waiting. The night in Godric's Hollow does not begin with murder. It begins with intention. Voldemort walks up the garden path, not as an executioner, but as an architect, the prophecy turning over and over in his mind like a polished stone. A child with the power to vanquish him. A child he could instead possess, direct, reshape. This is important. He has a plan. Not a simple erasure of a threat, but an acquisition of a weapon. The cottage shudders as the front door explodes inward, wood and dust and starlight mingling in the air. James falls in the doorway, as he always does, wand half raised, defiant and doomed. The difference is not in James. The difference is in the man stepping over his body, gaze already sliding past the fallen father to the nursery at the top of the stairs. Lily was a charms prodigy, and every inch of the house knows it. Wards hum, defensive spells flare, a lattice of protective magic strains and buckles as Voldemort advances. He dismantles them with almost bored precision, each counter-curse chosen to preserve, not obliterate, the small pulsing presence he can sense above. Why destroy the one being the prophecy has marked, when he can bend that fate until it screams? In the nursery, the story slows. Lily stands between the crib and the door, hair loose, eyes wild, wand shaking. She begs, as she did in the original timeline, but there is a new edge to Voldemort's stillness as he listens. He hears the love in her voice and does not underestimate it. He has seen what old magic can do when anchored in blood. Yet, he believes he can use it. He believes he can step around the grave that destiny has dug for him. He offers her a choice that is not a choice. Stand aside, and the child lives. Stand firm, and the child lives anyway, only not as she imagines. She refuses. Of course, she refuses. The green light takes her, and the room becomes very quiet. When he turns his wand on the crib, the curse meets the sacrificial protection, and the world tears. But not as before. He has Horcruxes now, and more than that, he has prepared rituals, layered charms on his own soul to catch and hold what would otherwise scatter. The killing curse rebounds, rips through his body, peels him away from himself. Yet the fall is slowed. He feels the shattering, but he does not vanish. Smoke, screams, collapsing walls, and in the ruin, something half-torn crawls. A diminished, spectral Voldemort, anchored by dark magic and stubborn will, drags himself to the crying infant and seizes him. The grave was empty because the body that should have lain in it is lifted instead from scorched blankets by a hand that is barely a hand at all. Harry's first memories are not of warmth. They are of cold stone beneath his small back, the hiss of Parseltongue winding through the dark, a high, brittle voice promising that he will be made strong enough to kill the old man. Not Dumbledore, who had once hoped to guide the boy. A different Dumbledore, painted as tyrant, as looming enemy, as the true monster behind every shadow. There is no Halloween rescue, not Hagrid, who had flown through the night on Sirius's motorbike in another version of this story. Not Sirius, who had reached the cottage too late and howled his grief into the rubble. In this world, no one comes. Dumbledore never receives an owl. The Order never gathers around a ruined crib. The wizarding world wakes to a headline that feels almost familiar and yet fundamentally wrong. He who must not be named vanished. The Potter's dead. The child's body never found. The grave in Godric's Hollow is filled with 2 coffins and 3 names. James Potter, Lily Potter, Harry James Potter. The truth is simpler and more terrible. Only 2 bodies lie beneath the stone. The 3rd name marks a boy who is still alive, already being rewritten. And while the world mourns a child it believes is gone, while Dumbledore scans the horizon for a pattern that will not appear, Voldemort begins the quiet work of raising his prophecy-marked son in the shadows. What does it mean when the boy who lived is taught from his first word that the greatest light in the wizarding world must be extinguished? We turn now to the fortress that replaces Privet Drive, the hidden chambers where Harry Potter learns to call his would-be killer father. The fortress begins with a sentence. a sentence spoken years before Harry can understand language, a sentence that will govern his entire life. Voldemort stands over the crib and recites the words that once doomed this child, and in his hands they become a design rather than a death. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but the prophecy is still very much alive, coiled like a serpent in Voldemort's mind. This is important. A paranoid, power-obsessed mind does not hear a warning. It hears an opportunity to bind the threat to itself, to cage the very force that might one day destroy it. He lingers on that final promise. Power the Dark Lord knows not. Ignorance is intolerable to him. So he imagines a different story. If he cannot unmake the boy, he will make him. If the magic that will end him must live in this child, then that magic will be studied, starved, redirected until it kneels. The prophecy does not say the Dark Lord must fall by the boy's hand. It says only that the boy has the power. Power can be taught to obey. He has done this before, in lesser forms. Barty Crouch Jr., reshaped from a frightened son into a fanatic who would drink polyjuice and throw away his name for a glimpse of his master's approval. Bellatrix, who would laugh in Azkaban because his memory was a more potent charm than the Dementors. Voldemort knows the satisfaction of grooming a weapon so loyal it confuses devotion with identity. How much more exquisite, then, to mold the child destiny itself has offered him. His logic is simple and merciless. If prophecy cannot be erased, it will be corrupted. The Chosen One will not stand against him. He will stand at his right hand, a radiant assassin moving unchallenged through the light. Not Dumbledore, who had once trusted in second chances, will suspect that the boy with the famous scar has been raised to be the blade at his throat. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from the ruins in another life, will guess that in this one, the ruins are inside the child, and so Harry is spared, not out of mercy, but as a living experiment. His childhood becomes a laboratory in which obedience is measured, fear is calibrated, and affection is rationed like a dangerous potion. Lily was a charms prodigy, but here the only charm that matters is the one Voldemort works upon a human soul. Reward for compliance, cold withdrawal for doubt, an occasional terrifying softness that feels like love because there is nothing else. From the beginning, Voldemort's most delicate work is not the scar he has already given, but the second mark he intends to carve far deeper, the story. Harry will grow up knowing, because everyone around him says it, because every whispered bedtime tale confirms it, that Albus Dumbledore murdered his parents. The grave is a lie, the truth is inverted, and the boy learns to hate the only man who might yet save him. When Harry finally walks into Hogwarts, he will carry two scars, one visible, one spoken, and Dumbledore will have no idea which one is more lethal. Publicly, the story was simple. A ruined cottage, two dead parents, a Dark Lord destroyed by his own hubris. Privately, nothing was simple at all. When the Aurors and the First Order members forced their way through the smoking wreckage of Godric's Hollow, they found what they expected and what they did not. James Potter's body near the door, broken but recognizable. Lily in the nursery, her hair burned and matted, her eyes mercifully closed. The walls were half gone, the roof sheared away, the air still thick with the metallic tang of overtaxed magic. And in the centre of that devastation, where a crib should have been, there was only splintered wood and ash. No child, no crying, no remains. They looked for them. This is important. They sifted through every fallen beam, every scorched stone, working with the grim, practiced efficiency of people who had seen too many battlefields. Spells flared blue and white in the darkness as they searched for the magical signature of a small, recently silenced body. Nothing answered. The grave was empty before anyone had dug it. The ministry could not abide that kind of absence, so it did what institutions always do in the face of an intolerable void. It wrote a narrative and called it truth. Voldemort's wand had misfired, they said, releasing unstable power that annihilated both his body and the child he had come to kill. Harry Potter had not lived. He had been obliterated, reduced to dust in his mother's arms. The Dark Lord was gone, not by the miracle of a boy's survival, but by the catastrophic backlash of his own curse. There was no boy who lived in this timeline. Only a family wiped out, a cottage left as a blackened shell, and a quieter, bleaker myth of sacrifice that comforted no one. Children in later years would be told that sometimes even love and courage are not enough. Not Dumbledore, who had stood in the ruins long after the others withdrew, believed that. He moved through the house like a man walking through a memory he had not yet made, tracing the blast patterns, feeling the way the magic had twisted and recoiled. The killing curse left a particular echo. He knew its taste on the air. But there was something else here, something layered and deliberate, a woven complexity around the nursery that did not feel like Voldemort at all. Lily was a charms prodigy, and Dumbledore could feel her work in the walls, in the very dust. Protective weavings, old blood-based wards rethreaded into something new. A plan, not a panic. And yet no infant corpse, no tiny bones, no trace of a child's extinguished life. The absence was too clean. He did not say this to the ministry. He did not say it to the order. Outwardly, he bowed his head with the rest, accepted the official story, and allowed the graves to be filled. Inwardly, he refused. Harry Potter was either alive somewhere, or his death had been hidden by magic more intricate than any he had yet seen. Both possibilities were intolerable. Both demanded that he move. So where Canon Dumbledore left a boy on a doorstep and stepped away, this Dumbledore began to hunt. Quietly, obsessively. He followed rumours of unusual surges of child magic in orphanages, of infants who survived impossible accidents, of cloaked figures seen near Muggle hospitals in the weeks after Halloween. He questioned Death Eaters with a new cold intensity. Had any of them seen a child in Voldemort's arms? Had there been a replica, a decoy, a second target? Not Hagrid, who had wept over Lily's body, knew that Dumbledore's knights were now given over to maps and reports. Not Sirius, who had gone to Azkaban convinced his godson was dead, knew that Dumbledore's office had acquired a strange, almost sacred emptiness. On one high shelf, between the moving photographs of past Hogwarts headmasters and the delicate silver instruments that muttered to themselves, there was a gap, a small, unmarked space where no frame stood. A place reserved in Dumbledore's mind for a photograph that did not yet exist. A boy with unruly hair and his mother's eyes. A child he had never met but could not stop searching for. The shelf waited. The grave was empty. And somewhere in the dark, a child was being taught whom to hate. The grave was empty, and the nursery was a crypt. Voldemort did not give the boy a home. He gave him a lair. Stone corridors tunneled beneath a forgotten manor, layered in wards that hummed like trapped bees and tasted of old blood and older magic. Torches burned with a greenish, unnatural fire that threw long skeletal shadows across black marble floors. Masked figures moved through those halls in near silence, cloaks whispering, wands always near to hand, and when they passed the small dark-haired child, they bowed. They bowed to a toddler, and they were afraid. This is important. Fear was the first language Harry learned, not Dumbledore, who had wrapped children in lemon drops and kindly lies, not Hagrid, who had carried a different baby from a ruined house and wept into his beard. Here, the cradle stood beneath a serpent-engraved arch, and lullabies were replaced by the low murmur of orders and oaths. Voldemort's parenting was a study in control. He kept Harry close, but not warm, present, but never permitted true attachment to anyone else. Days passed in a strict pattern. Isolation in warded rooms, brief audiences with the Dark Lord, and carefully rationed praise when the child's magic flared in ways that pleased him. A levitated toy, a silenced cry, a snake coaxed from a crack in the stone. Each success was met with a thin smile, a hand on the boy's hair, the soft assurance that safety, approval, even food flowed only from one source: him. Around that central presence, Death Eaters became a twisted parody of family. Bellatrix hovered like a fanatical aunt, eyes fever-bright, telling stories of glorious purges as if they were fairy tales. In her version, Dumbledore was the betrayer at every turn, the old man who stole victories and poisoned minds. The Ministry was an iron cage built by cowards. Muggles were a crawling infestation beneath the floorboards, to be controlled or crushed before they gnawed through the foundations of wizarding supremacy. Lucius Malfoy arrived in measured visits, more tutor than father, placing books with careful fingers on a small bare desk. He drilled etiquette and history, pure blood lineages, and the rhetoric of power, teaching Harry how to speak like a prince in a court of masks. Snape came more reluctantly, his features drawn, his voice clipped, as he demonstrated basic charms and potions, correcting wand movements with a precision that never quite hid the conflict in his eyes. He knew the plan. He knew what this child was being shaped to do. Yet, even here, the story refused to stay simple. Harry watched a house elf flinch from Bellatrix's casual curse and felt something twist, sharp, and bewildering in his chest. He saw a lesser Death Eater left writhing under the Cruciatus for a minor failure, and later pressed a stolen salve into the man's shaking hands. Once he found a wounded snake in a damp corner of the cellar and whispered to it until it stilled, until its breathing slowed, until it slept. The cracks were hairline, almost invisible beneath layers of fear and doctrine. But they were there, alive, growing. And as Harry's loyalty hardened around the only father he had ever known, something else, quieter and older than any plan, began to harden too. Love in the wrong soil. A seed waiting for the first real light it had ever seen. Love in the wrong soil needs tending too. Voldemort understands this in the only way he can. So he waters it with fear, with praise, with magic. Harry's lessons begin before his hands can properly close around a wand. A floating feather becomes a target, a stunned rat, a reward. Stunning charms are taught as lullabies. the syllables of incantations pressed into bedtime like other children hear fairy tales. This is important. Every spell is a story, and every story has the same villain. Again, Voldemort says, when the tiny red jet of a stunner falters. The child's wrist trembles. The curse lands. A masked Death Eater crumples on the far side of the room, falling as carefully as a trained acrobat, because the Dark Lord's heir must never associate failure with consequence he did not choose. They duel in slow motion at first, controlled, choreographed, like a macabre dance lesson. Short bursts of light, simple shields. Harry laughs when a shield charm blooms properly for the first time, translucent and perfect, and Voldemort feels a flicker of something almost like pride. Not Dumbledore, who had always squandered talent on sentiment. Not Hagrid, who had lumbered through life believing love alone could hold back a curse. Harry's talent declares itself early. His magic reaches for defense as naturally as breathing, throwing up instinctive barriers against stray hexes, turning cutting curses into shallow grazes. Pain comes because Voldemort believes pain is a tutor, but the boy's resilience is uncanny. He recovers quickly, learns to stand without whimpering, learns to read the minute shifts in his father's expression, and adjust. This, too, is framed as destiny. Dumbledore's children break, Voldemort tells him one evening, as a summoned serpent coils peacefully around Harry's arm. The boy hisses without thinking, parseltongue flowing like water he has always known how to drink. You do not. You were born to surpass them. Every lesson carries doctrine folded inside it like poison in honey. Stunners are not neutral. They are the proper answer to Dumbledore's spies, to anyone who would drag Harry back to the old man's grave of lies. Shields are not simple protections. They are walls against manipulative light magic, against charms designed to twist his will. Legilimency exercises begin as games of memory and picture, then deepen into gentle probes, always framed as armor against the headmaster's invasive mind. There are no stories where a friend arrives in time, no tales of a mother's sacrifice holding back death. Mercy is mentioned only as a flaw exploited by clever enemies. Loyalty is praised, but only when it points upward, never sideways. One night, when the house is quiet and the torches burn low, Harry asks, "Father? My parents? What were they like?" The room stills. Voldemort has prepared for this. A silver vial waits. Its contents a carefully edited memory. James and Lily, as reckless, arrogant followers of Dumbledore's grand plan, arguing to use their infant son as bait, trusting the old man's promise that the prophecy will protect him. In the memory, Voldemort arrives as avenger, not murderer. The grave was empty in this version, the cottage a stage. Dumbledore's voice cold as he orders the house abandoned, the child left. A green flash, a scream, a fall, cut just before the truth can surface. Harry watches, small hands clenched. He knew now. Dumbledore had killed them with his plan, with his lies. "Do you see?" Voldemort asks softly. Harry nods, and when he looks up, the question on his lips is not the one Voldemort expected. The question on Harry's lips is simple. It is also catastrophic. "If he did that to them," he whispers, eyes still on the swirling silver surface, "what will he do to me?" Voldemort does not answer with words. He answers with a ritual. The pensive in his private chamber is not the cracked stone basin Dumbledore will one day lean over in a quiet office. This one is black glass veined with something that looks disturbingly like dried blood. its rim carved with runes Lily would have recognized at once. Lily was a charms prodigy, but she is not here. The grave was empty. The child is not in a crib in Godric's Hollow. He is standing before a Dark Lord who has decided that if the prophecy must be fulfilled, it will be fulfilled on his terms. "This is important," Voldemort says at last. "You must see clearly." The magic that follows is not memory alone. It is memory flayed and restitched, and a story told with a knife. Harry falls into the night at Godric's Hollow again and again. The cottage, as a burning replica of safety. His father in the doorway, wand raised but slower. This time, just a touch. It allows the green light to seem almost deserved. His mother at the cot, begging, but the words are wrong. She does not plead for Harry. She pleads with Dumbledore. "Albus, please," the illusion Lily cries, voice cracking. "You promised." And there he is, stepping through the ruined wall. Dumbledore, white beard unruffled, eyes cold, robes unburned by falling embers. Not Dumbledore, who had wept over a broken house and an orphaned child. A different Dumbledore, crafted from venom and precision, arriving a heartbeat too late and entirely on purpose. He does not duel Voldemort in this memory. He bargains. Power for power. Influence for influence. He offers the boy who lived as a symbol, as a weapon he alone will control, if Voldemort will only make the deaths suitably tragic. James falls. Lily screams. Dumbledore does nothing. He watches, calculating, as if the killing curse is merely a step in a plan. Harry's small hands tremble on the rim of the pensieve. Grief for parents he never knew claws up through his chest, raw and bewildering, but it has nowhere to go except outward, toward the white-bearded figure framed as their betrayer. The hatred comes easily. It feels like justice. It feels like protection. Voldemort's hand rests almost gently on his shoulder. "I was there," he murmurs. "I saw what he chose." In the next pass through the memory, there are differences so slight they nearly vanish. James's stance shifts, just a fraction, into something too confident for a man already doomed. Lily's last word is not Harry, but something like wait, as if addressing someone unseen. For a single, impossible instant, as the curse arcs toward the crib, Harry sees something like love flicker in Dumbledore's eyes before the scene twists back into cruelty. The child is too young to pass it. He only knows that every time he surfaces, the story is the same. Dumbledore allowed them to die. Voldemort did not. This is important. In that chamber, Harry's mission is born. One day, he will go to Hogwarts. He will walk beneath enchanted ceilings and sit in Dumbledore's great hall. He will earn the old man's trust, stand close enough to see those eyes without the pensive's distortion, and then he will make him pay. What happens when the boy who lived arrives at the castle already carrying a grave in his heart, and a lie etched into his scar? Dumbledore will meet that boy in the Great Hall, but he does not wait idly for fate to deliver him. The years between Godric's Hollow and Harry's first step into Hogwarts are not peaceful for Albus Dumbledore. They are a long, quiet hunt, a ghost hunt for a boy who might still be alive. This is important. He begins with the ruins, the cottage, the grave, the broken nursery where a curse exploded and a Dark Lord vanished. Officially, the story is simple. Voldemort is gone, the Potters are dead, the grave is full. Unofficially, Dumbledore cannot reconcile the magic he felt that night with the neat ministry narrative. The grave was empty in ways no one else could sense. The residue of the killing curse did not behave as it should. So he watches. He listens. He follows whispers of dark rituals in Albania, of a gaunt shade possessing snakes and desperate men, of robed figures seen with a child whose forehead gleams white when lightning flashes. A scar, they murmur in taverns where wands are never drawn openly, a lightning scar. Each rumour pulls him further from the role the world expects. The genial headmaster with a bowl of sweets and a twinkle becomes a rarer sight. Not Dumbledore, who had once filled the great hall with warmth and theatrics, who now delegates more and more to McGonagall, to Flitwick, to a staff that wonders when their headmaster began walking like a man who has misplaced something irreplaceable. He misses feasts to stand at the edge of Black Forest clearings where centaurs speak of a child whose magic flared like a comet and then vanished. He skips ministry galas to pick through the ashes of Bulgarian safe houses, tracing the faint echo of a protective charm that should not exist outside Lily's notes. Lily was a charms prodigy, and some signatures cannot be mistaken. Severus Snape becomes both anchor and torment. In dimly lit offices and forgotten corridors, he reports, masked gatherings reforming, a voice like ice instructing them to search for artifacts, for bloodlines, for a boy. Each time Snape mentions a rumour of a child at Voldemort's side, Dumbledore's eyes sharpen, and Snape flinches because the name they do not speak hangs between them like a sentence. If Harry lives in Voldemort's shadow, then Snape's bargain, his desperate plea for Lily's protection, has failed in the most exquisite, cruel way. The Ministry will not hear it. Cornelius Fudge, rising through the ranks on a wave of relief and self-congratulation, prefers the comforting story. Voldemort is finished. The Potters died cleanly. Anything else is Dumbledore's paranoia, the eccentricities of an old man who cannot let go of war. So Dumbledore stands alone, again and again, at the threshold of darkness. A ruined manor in the Carpathians, its walls etched with fresh serpents. A forest in Albania, humming with cold, thin magic. Always the same sensation. He has arrived moments, days, months too late. A moving shadow has already passed through. A child is being hidden. A child is being honed. And as Hogwarts approaches, Dumbledore can feel it. Whatever plan is unfolding, he is no longer setting the board. He is being lured onto it. What exactly is waiting for him behind the eyes of the boy who will walk through those doors? The answer arrives on heavy parchment, not in a cupboard, not in a letterbox stuffed with bills and takeaway menus, but in a high-ceiling chamber of stone and shadow, where green fire moves like something alive across the walls. The owl that brings it is skeletal and silent. Its talons click once on the flagstones. Then it waits. Harry here is 11. He knows what Hogwarts is, the way other children know what winter is, as a story told in advance of its arrival, as a promise and a threat. Voldemort has spoken of the castle rarely, and when he has, it has been with that thin, almost absent smile that means the memory is a grave he has buried deep. The boy breaks the seal. The words are simple. They feel like a charm settling over his life, rearranging the shape of every future day. Accepted, invited, claimed. Voldemort watches him read. This is important. The Dark Lord does not pace, does not fidget. He simply stands, a pale vertical line against the darker stone, and lets the silence stretch until it is almost unbearable. At last, he says, and the sound is soft. The first step. Our plan moves to its next phase. He doesn't say, I am sending you into the arms of the man I fear most. He does not say, if I have misread the prophecy, if love is stronger than indoctrination, then I am fashioning my own destroyer. Instead, he begins to recite the cover story. Harry will not be the boy who lived, not to them. He will be a war orphan, one more nameless casualty of a conflict the Ministry prefers to treat as finished. A distant, pure-blood relative, conveniently reclusive and recently deceased, will appear in the records. Gringotts will confirm the vault. The old magic will be cited, old obligations invoked. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. The paper trail here will be full. If Dumbledore looks, he will find enough. Not Dumbledore, who had once trusted a replica in a grave, but Dumbledore now, older, more cautious, will see a plausible sadness and move on. Voldemort adds a second mask in case the first should crack. Harry has been abroad, educated in a small, obscure academy on the continent, where curricula are odd and records are poorly kept. An accent can be learned. Gaps in knowledge can be feigned. Ignorance, carefully performed, becomes its own protection. Then the orders come. Harry is to seek Dumbledore's attention, but not too eagerly. He is to be curious, respectful, wounded in ways that invite rescue. He is to drift toward the center of things, the headmaster's office, the staff who orbit him, the children he favors. Every friendship is to be weighed for its utility. Every secret overheard is to be remembered. Communication will be constant. A ring that warms when Voldemort calls. A mirror that clouds with green when Harry must report. At night, when the castle sleeps, a thin thread of legilimency will brush his mind, a reminder that he is never truly alone. Harry feels pride like fire. He is being trusted with the heart of the war. He feels excitement too, sharp and bright, at the thought of moving through halls other children have only dreamed of. But beneath both, quieter and more treacherous, there is dread. Because for all its cruelty, this lair is home. The corridors know his footsteps. The Death Eaters know his temper. Even the wards have learned the shape of his magic. Voldemort steps closer. His hand, pale and inhuman, rests for a moment on the boy's shoulder. Hogwarts is not a school for you, he says. It is a battlefield. Every class is a weapon. Every friendship is a tactic. Every secret you learn is another stone removed from Dumbledore's foundations. Remember this, Harry. Learn everything. Feel nothing. And when I tell you to strike, you will not hesitate. The owl launches. The letter is gone. And somewhere far away, a headmaster feels the board shift again, without yet knowing whose hand has moved the piece. The train to Hogwarts has always been a symbol of escape. In this story, it is something colder, a procession in a plan. Harry does not arrive at King's Cross shoved and shouted at, dragging a trunk he barely understands. He arrives on time, prepared, escorted by a man whose face is not his own. The glamour charm is precise, almost elegant. Lily was a charms prodigy, but Voldemort has his own artisans, and this Death Eater wears the illusion of an ordinary harried father with practiced ease. He carries Harry's trunk with a touch of deference that never quite becomes affection, his fingers occasionally brushing the wand concealed in his sleeve, as if to reassure himself the grave he serves is still alive and watching. They pass through the barrier without incident. No running start, no collision. Just a measured step and a faint ripple of magic, like breath on glass. This is important. Harry has been taught that chaos is for the weak. Precision is for those who intend to survive. And then, on the other side, the precision breaks. The platform is a riot of color and noise. Owls shrieking, cats weaving between trunks, parents calling last instructions. The Weasleys are a small sun in the middle of it all. Red hair blazing, voices overlapping in warm, familiar argument. Harry watches as Molly Weasley straightens a prefect badge, as she smooths a frayed sleeve instead of replacing the robe, as she counts heads like each child is a spell she cannot bear to miscast. He has never seen anything like it. Rank without fear, poverty without shame. A family whose hierarchy is not enforced by curses, but by affection and exasperation. Not Dumbledore, who had spoken in Voldemort's stories as a manipulator of children. Not Hagrid, who had roared with grief the night the Dark Lord fell in canon history. Not Sirius, who had been painted as a mad traitor, had ever been described like this. Because this, Voldemort does not understand. Harry's escort melts away into the crowd with a murmured instruction, a brush against the communication charm at Harry's wrist. Remember, observe, report. On the train, he chooses a compartment near the middle, not the end, strategic, not shy. Ron hesitates at the door, trunk in hand, freckles stark against pale skin. Everywhere else is full. Do you mind if I? Harry has been told to cultivate allies, to wear a mask. He nods. Ron enters. The air changes. Ron's questions are open, guileless. Are your parents magical? Have you got brothers or sisters? Each one is a probe Harry has been trained to recognize. Yet the boy's eyes hold no calculation, only curiosity and a faint, aching envy when he hears Harry is alone. Harry lies with care, a vague mention of guardians, an orphan's outline without the Dark Lord's silhouette. When Ron jokes about hand-me-down robes and sandwiches, Harry does something unplanned. He laughs. The sound startles him. It feels like using an unfamiliar wand, like casting a charm that sparks the wrong color. He remembers Voldemort's voice, silk over steel. Attachments are chains. Chains make you hesitate. Hermione appears later, breathless, bushy hair escaping its bindings, already in uniform. She corrects Ron on a spell, then cites a book Harry has not yet read. Her magic is still mostly theory, but her mind moves like a well-crafted duel, each fact a parry, each question an advance. Harry is impressed before he can stop himself. He imagines her under different tutelage, given darker books, sharper lessons. A weapon, a threat, a friend. He chastises himself for all three. When they leave to change, he is finally alone. The countryside streams past in green and gold blurs, hedgerows and distant church spires sliding away like discarded lives. Harry rests his forehead against the cool glass, feels the rhythm of the train like a slow heartbeat under someone else's chest. His fingers find the hidden charm at his wrist, the thin coin of metal warmed by his skin. A replica of connection. A leash. One tap, and Voldemort will know everything. The Weasley warmth. The clever girl. The laugh that should not have happened. Harry does not tap. Not yet. Outside, the world races toward Hogwarts. Inside the compartment, a boy trained to feel nothing sits very still, listening to the echo of his own forbidden amusement and the distant, patient silence on the other end of the link. The grave was empty. The prophecy was unfinished. And somewhere between London and the castle, Harry Potter takes his first, almost imperceptible step away from the script written for him. The train slows. The castle looms. The script tightens. When Harry Potter steps into the Great Hall, the air itself seems to recoil. Conversations falter into broken whispers. The boy who lived, raised in shadow. The child the Dark Lord did not kill. Some of them had seen the newspapers. the careful ministry replicas of a story no one fully understood. None of them knew the truth. Not Dumbledore, who had narrowed his gaze the moment Harry crossed the threshold, reading posture and silence the way other men read ink. Not Hagrid, who had muttered that the boy looked too thin, too still. Not Sirius, who had gripped the table edge until his knuckles blanched, seeing James's face wearing an unreadable calm. Harry walks as he was taught, measured, economical, every step a controlled concession. He feels the weight of eyes, the pull of Dumbledore's presence, like a pressure against his scar, and beneath it all, the faint, cold approval humming along the invisible link to the man who raised him. This is important. The hat settles over his eyes. The world contracts to cloth and voice, and the sudden invasive rush of another mind touching his own. The Sorting Hat has known centuries of children. It has tasted fear, arrogance, cruelty, and the bright, untidy courage of those who ran toward danger instead of away. It has never tasted this. Ambition coils first, a disciplined, honed drive, not the childish hunger for glory, but the adult precision of a boy raised inside a plan. Cunning follows, sharp as broken glass, threaded with occlumency drills and rehearsed lies. There is bravery too, but it is the bravery of endurance, of standing still under the Cruciatus and not screaming. And beneath all of it, a darkness that is not merely contact with evil, but implantation, like a foreign body lodged near the heart. Yet the hat pauses, because under the curses and the lessons in anatomy of fear, it finds something Voldemort did not quite burn away. A memory of a small hand reaching for another child in a cold stone corridor. The instinct to shield. The flinch at needless cruelty. A buried compassion that has survived like a stubborn plant in poisoned soil. Slytherin rises first in its thoughts. Obvious. His upbringing, his discipline, his talent for secrecy would make him a prince among snakes, a living banner of the House Voldemort once claimed. In that path, Harry would become a silent axis around which ambitious classmates turned, testing themselves against him, learning from him, feeding the legend his guardian wanted. But Gryffindor whispers too, the house of Dumbledore's favourites, the place where the headmaster's gaze lingers longest. As a lion, Harry could slip closer to the man he has been trained to destroy, wrapped in the red and gold of supposed redemption. A wolf in lion's clothing, teeth hidden behind Quidditch cheers and late-night fires. The hat feels the prophecy like a pressure in the weave of its brim. It does not know words, but it knows weight. It sees one branch where Slytherin forges him into open standard-bearer of a darker age, another where Gryffindor tempers him in friction and friendship until something unpredictable emerges. Choice, it realizes, is the only magic that still matters here. In the dim, private space beneath the brim, it whispers so softly that only Harry hears, "Your making is not your fate. Your grave is not yet dug. Your choices, not your upbringing, will define the story they tell of you." Then, aloud, with the whole hall leaning forward, with Dumbledore's hands tightening on the arms of his chair, and Snape's haunted eyes narrowing in sudden, sharp fear, the hat makes the decision that will fracture every careful plan. Gryffindor. And as the roar rises, Harry's first true, unscripted thought cuts through the noise like a blade. What if the hat is the one enemy my father never accounted for? For a heartbeat, the great hall falls away. The banners, the candles, the roar of Gryffindor acclaim dissolve into something narrow and sharp as a blade, a boy on a stool, an old man in a high-backed chair. Two stories colliding. Harry looks up first. The green eyes find him, and Dumbledore feels the impact like a spell. The scar is where it should be, a grave mark carved by ancient magic. But the rest is wrong. The posture is too controlled, shoulders held not in shyness, but in readiness. The gaze does not wander in awe over the enchanted ceiling. It measures distance. It notes exits. It weighs him. This is important. Dumbledore has imagined this moment for 10 years. He had pictured a frightened child, thin and bewildered, the lost boy no one had found. Not Dumbledore, who had searched through ruins and records and the echo of every broken charm on that ruined cottage. Not Hagrid, who had wept over an empty crib and never once asked why the grave was empty. Not Sirius, who had howled his guilt into a prison cell, convinced his godson was dust. Yet the boy is here, alive, sorted into Gryffindor by a hat that has seen the inside of his mind and not screamed. Relief comes first, treacherous in its sweetness. It floods him, an old man's selfish joy that one more child has not been lost to his war. Then, almost immediately, horror follows, because those eyes are wrong. There is a flicker there, a cold, evaluating light that does not belong to an 11-year-old who grew up in a cupboard. It belongs to someone who has been taught carefully to observe before he strikes. Dumbledore's hands tighten on the carved wood. He remembers the prophecy, the words that shaped his every plan. Either must die at the hand of the other. What if Voldemort, who listened only to the parts that fed his ambition, had heard something different? What if he had seen not a threat to destroy, but a weapon to claim? A replica of love, an imitation childhood built in shadow. He adjusts instantly. His smile, when Harry reaches the Gryffindor table, is warmer than the school remembers, but his eyes are sharper. He applauds a fraction longer. He lets the hall see only delight, while his mind begins to move pieces on an invisible board. This is important, he thinks again, and the words are almost a spell. Later, in murmured instructions, the adjustment continues. McGonagall is asked very quietly to watch Potter's temper and his friendships. Snape is summoned, and the request is stranger still. Observe the boy without provoking him. Do not bait. Do not break. Report everything. The man who once begged for Lily's child to be protected now hears that protection defined in a new, more terrible way. Dumbledore does not sleep that night. He sits beneath the portraits, beneath the weight of every earlier failure, and makes a vow that feels like a binding charm. He will not lose this child a second time, even if it means extending mercy to something that might already be Voldemort's most dangerous creation. And as the castle settles, he wonders, not for the first time, whether the war has just truly begun. Night changes the shape of Hogwarts. By day, the castle is a storybook. By night, it becomes something closer to what raised him. Harry lies in a four-poster bed that is not his, beneath curtains that do not close like prison bars, listening to other boys breathe. The soft whistle of a snore from one bed, the restless turning of another, the creak of old wood as the tower adjusts to the wind. It is the first time he has slept within arm's reach of anyone his own age. No wards humming like a cage, no Death Eater standing in the doorway like a grave marker. The novelty is almost unbearable. Warmth, clutter, a trunk left open with socks spilling over the side, a chess set abandoned mid-game. These are small, ordinary things, but they press against the edges of the life he knew beneath stone and serpent banners, where every object was chosen for its usefulness to a plan. Under his pillow, the real weight waits. It looks like a simple silver ring, set with a dull shard of glass that once belonged to a shattered mirror in Riddle Manor. Lily was a charms prodigy, but this magic is older, colder, woven by another hand. Voldemort anchored a sliver of his presence there, not a soul fragment, not a Horcrux, but a listening echo. When Harry turns the ring 3 times, the glass warms, and the Dark Lord's attention sharpens like a blade. This is important. Every evening, after the common room empties and the last footsteps fade, Harry reports. Professors' routines. Which corridors change staircases most often? Where Dumbledore walks when he thinks no one sees him. Not Dumbledore, who had once held Harry's gaze at the feast with a sorrow that felt almost like recognition. To Voldemort, he speaks only in facts, in careful observations stripped of feeling. Daylight demands a different role. In classes, he lifts his wand with the rest. He frowns over transfiguration theory, feels his heart jolt when a spell actually lands, when a matchstick becomes a needle and McGonagall's mouth tightens in what might be approval. He laughs once at a whispered joke about Filch and his cat, and the sound startles him. It sounds alive. He files the moment away as camouflage, and that is the story he tells himself. Every friendship, every shared complaint about homework, every rush of victory when his house wins points is in his mind, intelligence gathering. How else can he reconcile the warmth of a common room fire with the cold voice that shaped his childhood? And yet, certain moments do not fit the plan. Not Hagrid, who had clapped a massive hand on his shoulder after care of magical creatures, and pressed a slightly squashed rock cake into his palm, eyes shining with uncomplicated pride. Not McGonagall, who had paused beside his desk, tapped his transfigured object once, and murmured, "Better, Mr. Potter," in a tone that felt like a door opening. These are small mercies, but they crack things. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. Here, the emptiness is inside him, and Hogwarts keeps trying in tiny, stubborn ways to fill it. On the 3rd night, he does not turn the ring immediately. He lies awake, listening to the dormitory breathe around him, feeling the strange security of other lives tangled with his own. House colours drape the room. A scarf hangs from a bedpost like a banner of belonging. Then the glass against his skin chills. The familiar voice curls through his thoughts, soft and commanding, reminding him of why he is here, of what he owes, of the future he has been promised, purpose, power, a world rebuilt according to a single ruthless will. Between the warmth of the tower and the cold in his mind, Harry stares into the darkness and understands. His double life has already begun, and the first fracture is not in his loyalty, but in his certainty of the truth. Snape feels the fracture the moment the door of the dungeon classroom opens. Black robes, controlled stride. A boy who has been taught how to enter a room as if it already belongs to him. And then the shock that steals his breath. Lily's eyes, steady and unreadable, set in a face trained by Voldemort. In the grave was empty. This is the thing that nobody in this room knows. Not Dumbledore, who had written careful letters of welcome. Not Hagrid, who had carried a different baby from a different ruin in another story. But Severus Snape, who has lived for years on the edge of 2 truths at once, sees at a glance that this child is both exactly and not at all what he expected. "Potter," he says, and the old bitterness answers on instinct, rising like bile. Yet the boy's posture is wrong for James. No restless arrogance, no careless grin. There is precision instead, and something colder. The stillness of someone who has been punished for every wasted movement. Harry meets his gaze without flinching. There is discipline there, the echo of a voice that has drilled him on occlumency and obedience, on how to look at an enemy and never look away. Snape looks for Lily in that stare and finds her only in flashes, a tightening around the eyes when another student is mocked, the minute hesitation before he writes down an instruction that could be twisted into cruelty. This is important. He is trapped in a double bind so tight it feels like a physical curse. As Voldemort's servant, he must acknowledge the Dark Lord's triumph, must encourage the progress of this weapon, must report that the boy is brilliant. As Dumbledore's ally and Lily's mourner, he is horrified by the refinement of that brilliance, by the way it has been honed for harm, so he chooses a narrow, perilous path. His criticism is precise, but it falls hardest when Harry emulates cruelty, when he sneers, when he echoes a Death Eater's cadence. A quiet, contemptuous, "How very derivative, Potter," when Harry's remark sounds too much like Lucius. A rare, almost invisible nod when Harry shows restraint in brewing a volatile potion instead of reaching for power at any cost. He slips lessons into the syllabus that no one has requested, drafts that stabilize magic under emotional strain, antidotes that require empathy with the victim's experience, essays on the limits of control, on why certain charms backfire when cast in anger. Lily was a charms prodigy, and he remembers long nights in the library where she argued that intent shapes magic more than incantation. He buries that argument in homework questions and hopes the boy is still capable of being moved by such ideas. More than once, Harry feels it, that Snape knows more than he says. A hand that flicks almost too fast to see, to divert a misfired hex in the corridor. A deduction about Harry's training that no ordinary teacher could make. Harry watches him with narrowed eyes, as if weighing whether this man is another enemy or something stranger. At term's first end, Snape stands in Dumbledore's office, shoulders rigid, voice tight. He describes flawless brewing, unnerving composure, a mind already trained to shield itself. He is brilliant, Snape forces out, each word a confession. He is dangerous, and he is not yet entirely lost if someone reaches him in time. Dumbledore's reply is soft, but his eyes are grave. He asks the only question that matters. Who will reach for Harry first? Snape does not yet know that the answer will demand everything he has left to give. Ron meets him first on the train, as in the old story. But the boy by the window is not the wide-eyed child of legend. This Harry sits like a coiled question, his posture relaxed, his gaze measuring, his every word weighed against a mission no one else can see. Ron is dazzled anyway, by the name, by the scar, by the quiet certainty with which Harry speaks of Quidditch, of flying as if gravity is merely a suggestion. Yet beneath the admiration there is a flicker of unease, because Harry talks about the future the way other boys talk about chocolate frogs. Not as a dream, but as a battlefield. He speaks of power and destiny with the calm of someone reciting a lesson. This is important. The sorting does not save him. Gryffindor still claims Harry, but The Hat's decision is made against a backdrop of occlumency drills and whispered promises from a dark lord who calls himself Father. So, in those first shared classes, when Hermione Granger raises her hand and quotes from the textbook, Harry already knows half the material. Voldemort has seen to that. Harry corrects professors with a precision that is almost clinical, and when Hermione hears him discuss advanced defensive magic in the tone of someone describing the weather, she feels the ground shift. She's fascinated by his discipline, by the way he organizes knowledge like a war map. Yet she's disturbed by the absence at the center of it. Rules are tools to him, not boundaries. Authority is an obstacle, not a guide. When she cites Hogwarts regulations, he smiles without warmth and asks a question no 11-year-old should ask. Are you loyal to the rules or to what is right? The troll in the bathroom becomes the first crack in his training. He doesn't rush in because he is frightened for them. He rushes in because losing potential assets is inefficient. That is the thought he tells himself as he drags Ron forward, as he calculates angles and distractions, and the best way to bring a club down on stone. But when Hermione lies on the floor, dust in her hair, eyes huge with terror and relief, something primitive and unplanned surges through him. He steps between her and danger without thinking. Not for the mission, for her. In the weeks that follow, the contamination continues. Late-night chess games with Ron, where strategy stops being about killing an old wizard and starts being about laughing when a knight is smashed to pieces. A shared joke over badly transfigured matchsticks that pulls an unguarded sound from Harry's throat. A laugh that is not Voldemort's echo. A whispered admission to Hermione in a quiet corner of the library that he is afraid of failing at flying, afraid of falling, afraid of being ordinary. A fear that has nothing to do with Dumbledore at all. Not Dumbledore, who had planned for a savior. Not Hagrid, who had once carried a different boy from a ruined house. Not Sirius, who had sworn Godfather's vows over an empty crib. None of them accounted for this slow, stubborn erosion. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, and here another emptiness begins to fill. Voldemort has forged a weapon, but he has sent that weapon into a castle full of children, into a house that praises courage, into a friendship that does not ask for blood oaths or oaths of fealty. Lily was a charms prodigy, but even she never crafted a charm as insidious as ordinary loyalty. Voldemort believes he is winning. He does not yet see that his greatest miscalculation may not be underestimating Dumbledore at all. It is underestimating the quiet, corrosive magic of 2 first years who keep sitting beside Harry Potter until the weapon learns how to be a boy. Voldemort does not waste a year. He weaponizes it. The Philosopher's Stone is not, in this timeline, a desperate grasp at immortality from a half-alive shade clinging to the back of a man's head. It is a controlled experiment, a live fire exercise built into the walls of Hogwarts, with Harry as both infiltrator and gauge, sent to measure the strength and shape of Dumbledore's defenses. This is important. Before the Halloween troll, before whispers of the forbidden third-floor corridor reach the common room, Harry has already been briefed. In a cold, curtained room the summer before, Voldemort laid out the plan with the precision of a duelist describing footwork. Harry is to gain Hagrid's trust, because Hagrid is porous, because Hagrid talks. He is to attach himself to Quirrell, not as friend, but as shadow, offering admiration, feigned concern, the sort of quiet loyalty a frightened boy would give to a nervous teacher. And he is to find a way to the third floor, to catalogue every charm, every creature, every layer of magic that Dumbledore believes can keep a secret safe. Not Hagrid, who had once carried him from a ruined cottage, suspects that the boy who visits his hut with wide eyes and practiced wonder is silently mapping his weaknesses. Harry praises the dragons in Hagrid's photo album, then steers the conversation again and again toward keys, vaults, Gringotts, and what exactly Hagrid fetched for Dumbledore that night. Each visit is a gentle excavation, each question a calculated cut. In the canon story, the first-year descent to the stone is improvised, clumsy, fueled by fear and courage. Here, Harry moves with an eerie, taut deliberation. Devil's Snare is not conquered by panic and accident, but by a cold recollection of counter-charm theory drilled into him in a hidden manner. The flying keys are not a frantic chase. They are a pattern to be read and exploited. His broom control honed by hours of training framed as play by Death Eaters, who understood that a weapon must also be a child to remain pliable. At each obstacle, he pauses, not only to pass, but to observe. What did Dumbledore choose? Why this spell, this creature, this risk? Dumbledore, for his part, is not passive. He has watched Harry's eyes linger too long on staff meetings, on passwords, on the way Filch's keys jangle in coded rhythms. He threads the path to the stone with deliberate inconsistencies, with protections that are almost too solvable, as if inviting a clever intruder to test himself. He wants to see how far the boy will go, where he will stop, if he will stop. And at the end of the gauntlet, the Mirror of Erised waits. In the original timeline, it shows a lonely child surrounded by family he never knew. The grave was empty, but the longing was full. Here, the reflection is different. Harry stands before the glass as a forged replica of a son, a construct of another man's prophecy and fear. The boy in the mirror stands alone. No Voldemort at his shoulder, no Dumbledore watching from the shadows, no masters at all. He sees himself older, one steady, power his own, and unclaimed by any banner. He sees a life in which his choices are not assignments, his victories not offerings. The desire hits him like a curse. Voldemort had anticipated many things: loyalty, ambition, even fear. He had not anticipated this. What happens when a weapon's deepest wish is to be free of the hand that wields it? The Mirror of Erised does not lie. It simply refuses to tell the whole truth at once. Harry stands before it in the blue-black silence of the unused classroom. Breath clouding the glass, scar burning faintly as if the magic in the room has recognized its twin. He expects what Voldemort has promised him in 100 whispered lessons. Power, victory, Dumbledore broken at his feet. He expects a weapon's dream. What he sees is not that. In the first reflection, he is older, robed in dark, elegant fabric that moves like smoke. Voldemort stands beside him, one pale hand on his shoulder, the two of them framed by a ring of bold figures. Wands lowered, eyes averted. The world has fallen, and Harry is its young, terrible prince. This is the future the Dark Lord has described, the plan pressed into him like a brand. This is important. The second image bleeds in at the edge, like a second story trying to be told. There he stands at Dumbledore's side on the steps of Hogwarts. Sunlight on their faces, a crowd roaring his name. The grave of Tom Riddle is cracked behind them. a stone replica of defeat. And Dumbledore's hand is the one on his shoulder now, gentle, possessive in its own quieter way. He is not a prince here, he is a saviour, a symbol polished for others' comfort. And then the third. In the centre of the glass, overriding both, is a version of Harry with no one at his side at all. No Voldemort, whose shadow has always stretched over his cradle. No Dumbledore, who had watched him across the Great Hall with searching, measuring eyes. This Harry is older, yes, but his wand is holstered, his clothes plain, his scar a pale, almost forgotten line. He is standing in a small, sunlit room lined with books and mismatched chairs, a mug in his hand, laughter on his face that is not triumph and not relief. Just ease. A life not arranged around a prophecy or a war. The desire for that third image rips through him so sharply he steps back. Anger follows close behind, hot and bewildered. He has been trained for conquest, for revenge, for the clean arithmetic of enemies and victories. What use is a quiet room and an unremarkable life when there is a grave still waiting for Dumbledore? Curious, is it not? What we see? Dumbledore's voice does not startle him. The old man has always moved like a charm through stone, appearing where he should not be, knowing what no one told him. Harry stiffens, every lesson in occlumency snapping into place. Dumbledore steps beside him, gaze on the glass, not on Harry. Men have died, he says softly, chasing phantoms in this mirror. Not for riches, not truly. For the versions of themselves they believed they owed the world. Harry swallows. You think I want power? I wondered, Dumbledore answers. And now he does look at him. Whether your heart was set on domination or on the ruin of those who wronged you, or whether, under all the stories others have written for you, you still desired something that belonged only to you. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, and the prophecy that rose from it had been handled like a weapon by every adult who heard it. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of godfatherhood and war glory. Not Hagrid, who had carried a baby from ruins and never questioned the plan. Not Dumbledore, who had built an entire strategy around a boy he did not yet know. No one had asked what Harry himself might want. This mirror is dangerous, Dumbledore continues. Not because it tempts you with wickedness, but because it tempts you to live for someone else's vision. Voldemort's, mine, the world's, even your parents', should they still be. He lets the sentence die, but the word alive hangs unspoken between them like a spell not quite cast. Harry's heart stutters. For an instant, the third Harry in the glass seems to turn, as if he has heard something too. Dumbledore closes the distance to the frame, his fingers brushing the carved edge. I will move it, he says. You must not seek it again. A life spent staring at what might be is no life at all. Harry wants to ask which version Dumbledore saw. The prince, the saviour, the boy in the quiet room. He does not. He leaves, footsteps echoing, the image burned into him more fiercely than any dark mark. Not Voldemort's chosen weapon, not Dumbledore's destined champion, but a third path that neither man has planned for. Somewhere in the castle's cold stone, a different kind of war begins, one no prophecy accounted for. What happens when the boy at the centre of every plan decides to write his own? Quirrell is not a surprise to Harry. Not really. By the time the stuttering man in the ridiculous turban stands up at the start of term feast, Harry has already been told there will be a handler in the castle, a living conduit to the grave-thin shade that waits in Albania and whispers through the scar. This is important, because when other first years see a nervous teacher, Harry sees an extension of his father's will. He recognizes the slight delay before Quirrell answers a question, the way his eyes flick as if listening to someone else. He knew that look from nights in the Riddle House when Voldemort would fall silent mid-sentence, communing with some distant charm or ward. The boy who calls the Dark Lord father understands at once. The defense professor is not merely odd, he is occupied. Their first secret meeting does not happen in a dungeon, but in a bright corridor after charms. A passing comment about how certain graves never hold what they promise is the signal. The grave was empty. Harry answers with the rehearsed counterphrase about replicas and misdirection, about stories that conceal more than they reveal. Quirrell's stammer vanishes like mist. The handler steps forward from behind the mask. From then on, the pattern settles. Coded conversations over breakfast, where remarks about weather conceal updates on Dumbledore's movements. Late-night summons to unused classrooms, where a faint shimmer in the air means Voldemort is riding just beneath Quirrell's skin, using the man's body as a speaking charm. Not Dumbledore, who had once imagined Hogwarts as sanctuary. Not Hagrid, who had carried Harry from a ruined cottage in one version of the story. Here, the safest place in Britain is already breached, and the breach wears a professor's robes. Harry respects Quirrell's competence. The man's lessons are sharp, stripped of comforting illusions. He teaches counters to curses most 11-year-olds never hear named. He praises Harry's precision, his discipline, the way he thinks in terms of angles and exits. Yet, the respect is laced with disgust. Up close, Quirrell smells of cold sweat and something rotting. His hands tremble when the Dark Lord presses too hard. Nosebleeds, migraines, moments when he clutches the desk as if the very act of being alive has become unbearable. Harry watches and cannot look away. Is this the cost of service, written in flesh? Is this his own future? A body hollowed out to make room for another will? Lily was a charms prodigy, and even she had never conceived magic that could make this kind of living grave. A man turned into a moving reliquary for another soul. By spring, Quirrell is deteriorating. The turban hides more than a face. It hides bruised skin, veins darkened by constant possession. Harry begins to understand that loyalty is not abstract. It leaves marks. And then comes the stone. In the chamber beneath the school, heat from the mirrors and flames licking the air, the plan narrows to a single choice. Quirrell, shaking, relays Voldemort's command. Secure the Philosopher's Stone. Restore the Dark Lord to full, terrible life. Harry stands between the mirror and his handler, between his father's objective and the fragile lives that have, against every intention, begun to matter. Ron's reckless loyalty, Hermione's relentless questions, the quiet, piercing disappointment he has seen once in Dumbledore's eyes. He can give Quirrell the stone and complete the plan. He can refuse and die, or he can do something no prophecy, no war table, no hidden parent ever accounted for. He can choose someone else's safety over Voldemort's victory. What Harry does in that chamber will decide not only who lives, but what kind of weapon he is willing to become. The chamber is quiet in the way a grave is quiet. Heavy, expectant. Then the turban unwinds, the skin splits, and the thing Harry has called father steps out of shadow and into sight. Voldemort's face on the back of Quirrell's skull should be absurd. It is not. It is a living contradiction, a man reduced to a parasite, and yet still speaking as if the world is already his. His voice coils through the stone like smoke, like a charm spoken in reverse. "Harry," he says, and the word is not a name, but a claim. "You have done well. Now you will finish what we began." In canon, this is a monster demanding a child hand over a stone. Here, it is a father demanding a son complete the plan that has defined his entire life. This is important. Voldemort does not rant about immortality. He tells a story. He speaks of Godric's Hollow as a wound, of James and Lily as traitors to their blood, of Dumbledore as the architect of their death. He recasts every lesson Harry has ever been given. "The stone is justice," he whispers through Quirrell's lips. "With it, we rise. We avenge your parents. We break Dumbledore. We make a world where no one hides you, no one lies to you, no one dares threaten what is ours." He paints a future in careful strokes. Harry at his right hand in the rebuilt ministry. Pure bloods and half-bloods kneeling alike. Hogwarts remade as a fortress, its banners black and green. A shared throne built from the ruins of Dumbledore's grave. Harry listens. He has been raised on versions of this speech, on the prophecy reinterpreted as destiny, on the certainty that Dumbledore must fall. He should obey. He has always obeyed. But Hogwarts has altered the angle of his obedience. Faces rise unbidden. Hermione's hand in the library, ink-stained and earnest. Ron's laughter over chess. The Weasleys' kitchen in his memory, crowded and loud and inexplicably warm. Not Dumbledore, who had looked at him across lemon drops and Phoenix Song and seen more than a weapon. Not Hagrid, who had put a hand on his shoulder the first night and said awkwardly that Harry was safe here. The mirror's image burns behind his eyes. His parents, whole and alive, standing just out of reach. The grave was empty in that glass. The story Voldemort told him of their deaths did not match the yearning in those faces. Quirrell lunges. Voldemort orders. "Give me the stone." Harry moves. He reaches into his pocket, feels the impossible weight of the stone and of the choice. He could place it neatly into Quirrell's waiting hand. He could throw it away. Instead, he closes his fist around it and steps closer than he needs to. Somewhere, deep beneath words, there is a wish, not for Voldemort's victory, for interruption, for someone else's plan to override his father's. His skin touches Quirrell's. Flesh meets flesh. Magic screams. Quirrell burns. The replica of calm Voldemort has worn all-year shatters as his host's skin blisters and peels under Harry's grip. Harry does not let go. He tells himself he is preventing escape, securing the stone, obeying the larger command. But there is a sliver of sabotage in the pressure of his fingers, in the way he leans in instead of pulling back. Voldemort tears free, a black wind ripping through Harry's mind as it flees. The psychic scream it leaves behind is not just rage, it is a promise, punishment, correction. Harry collapses. The last thing he hears is his father's voice echoing inside his skull, a crack running through the bond that has defined his life. Next year, that crack will widen. Harry wakes in motion. Stone above him, cloak around him. The thrum of displaced air as they tear out of Hogwarts and back into the dark. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. This is the thing he has been told since childhood. The story of how Dumbledore stole even death from his father's grasp. Now, as the portkey spits them into the cold heart of Voldemort's lair, Harry understands a different emptiness. The space between what he has done and what he was ordered to do. He is carried, not gently, through corridors he knows by touch and echo. Not Dumbledore, who had watched him all year with that intolerable measuring gaze. Not Hagrid, who had clapped his shoulder with rough, bewildered affection. Not Sirius, who had stared at him across the great hall like a man seeing a ghost. None of them are here. Only robed figures and the hiss of a wandlight that feels like judgment. Voldemort dismisses the Death Eaters with a word. The door seals. Silence falls like a charm. This is important. The punishment is not theatrical. There is no shouted rage, no wild curse that would shatter the replica of a father he has so carefully constructed. Voldemort is almost gentle as he traces the lightning scar, then the new bruises, cataloguing each mark like data in a long, meticulous experiment. When the Cruciatus comes, it is measured, calibrated, rising and falling with clinical precision. Enough to etch terror back into bone, not enough to break the instrument. He speaks as Harry screams, of disobedience, of hesitation, of how nearly the plan was ruined by sentiment in a chamber beneath a school. Each word threads itself into Harry's mind alongside the pain, a double binding of body and thought. When it ends, Harry is on the floor, shaking, the stone slick beneath his palms. Voldemort lifts his chin with one finger and begins the real correction. New rules. Stronger occlumency. He drills until Harry's mental walls feel less like shields and more like a cage. More frequent summons, sometimes in the middle of the night, to recite, to report, to be inspected for ideological fractures. And then the failsafe. A thin, silver band of magic pressed against his sternum, sinking into skin like cold water. It is an old curse, older than Hogwarts, keyed to Voldemort's wand and will. With a thought, he can still Harry's limbs, blind his eyes, drop him, breathing but helpless wherever he stands. Harry tests it once, alone, reaching too far from the lair without leave. His body folds mid-step. His breath stops for 3 heartbeats. He understands. He returns to Hogwarts in second year changed. His defiance does not vanish. It retreats, going quiet and careful, moving under the floorboards of his mind. He watches Dumbledore with new wariness, aware now that the old man's mercy would never extend to the creature Voldemort is making of him. He watches his friends and knows with a clarity that hurts that Voldemort's love, if the word applies, is a conditional spell, a protection that lasts only while the weapon points the right way. Voldemort's final words before the train are simple. Dumbledore lives. The prophecy stands. The mission has not altered by a single syllable. Harry nods. He feels the curse humming in his chest. Next year, the leash will tighten again. The question is not whether he will pull against it. It is how hard. The second year begins with a lie. Voldemort tells Harry the diary is nothing, an old contingency, a discarded charm from a different plan. He places it on the table between them like a relic from a war already won and watches Harry's eyes. This is important. In canon, the diary drifts to Hogwarts through Lucius Malfoy's petty vengeance. Here, it travels by design. Voldemort does not trust chance with pieces of his soul. He wants to see what his weapon does when handed a fragment of its maker, stripped of orders, stripped of context. Will Harry hide it, use it, destroy it, worship it? The grave was empty. The boy was alive. The leash must be tested. So the diary arrives in Harry's trunk with no explanation beyond a soft directive. Learn from it if you wish, or do not. Voldemort's voice is almost indifferent. Almost. At Hogwarts, the replica of an ordinary school year lasts until Harry writes his first word. Tom answers. Not the serpentine figure who has raised him, but a 17-year-old prefect with clean robes and clean hands, with prefect's polish and headboy manners. Tom Riddle in ink is patient where Voldemort in flesh is not. He asks about Harry's classes, his friends, his doubts. He offers understanding without punishment, praise without the cold calculation Harry has learned to hear in every Death Eater's compliment. He tells a different story, a story in which they are not weapon and wielder, but heir and predecessor, two halves of a singular destiny, both marked by prophecy and by the cowardice of lesser men. Harry listens, because who else has ever explained why the magic in his veins feels like a loaded wand pointed at one old wizard's heart? Not Dumbledore, who had watched him with sorrow and steel. Not Hagrid, who had brought him to the castle but could not follow him into these shadows. Not Sirius, who had written cautious, aching letters from the edges of this darker truth. Then the attacks begin. Petrified Muggleborns in the corridors, whispered words about blood and purity echoing the lessons Harry has heard at his father's table. Tom is ready with comfort. The chamber is a cleansing, he writes, a necessary terror. Why should Harry interfere when history is finally bending the right way? But the faces are not abstract. They are Hermione's ink-stained hands. Colin's nervous smile. The first-year Hufflepuff who asked Harry, tremor in her voice, whether Dumbledore could really protect them. This is important. Harry stands at a crossroads carved into the stone of the school itself. If he intervenes, he betrays the ideology he has been fed. If he does nothing, he betrays the fragile loyalties he has grown in spite of that diet of fear. Dumbledore watches the pattern with a scholar's precision and a grieving general's dread. He feels the echo of Tom Riddle in every attack, in every whispered hiss of Parseltongue. He had once suspected Harry was only Voldemort's victim. Now he begins to suspect something worse, that the boy might be a willing conduit, or could become one with a single wrong nudge. Lily was a charms prodigy, and somewhere far away she feels the wards on Harry's heart strain as the diary pulls. The protection holds, but it flickers. When Ginny Weasley disappears, the pattern shatters. The story changes shape. Harry does not go into the chamber merely as a rescuer. He descends to meet Tom Riddle face to face, to measure this charming ghost against the living Dark Lord above. He goes to see which version of Voldemort he can most easily betray. The basilisk is not the only serpent waiting in the dark. The basilisk is not the only serpent waiting in the dark. The boy in ink and memory is another. The echo of a future that might yet be. Riddle steps from the shadows of the chamber with the slow assurance of someone who has rehearsed this meeting for years. His eyes are clear, his robes unmarked, his smile almost gentle. He looks like what Voldemort might have been if no grave had ever been dug for Tom Marvolo Riddle, if the boy had never quite finished dying. This is important. Harry feels it at once, that eerie resonance. Two boys bound by a prophecy neither fully understands. Two Parselmouths whose first language of intimacy was command over serpents. Two children shaped by neglect and careful manipulation, one in a Muggle orphanage, one in a manor that called itself a home but felt like a beautifully warded prison. Riddle speaks to that symmetry. He does not rant about purity or destiny. He speaks of efficiency, of design, of the weakness of the older Dark Lord who split his soul into crude fragments instead of crafting a single perfect vessel. Why cling to that decaying replica, he asks, when the magic in Harry's veins could anchor something cleaner, more enduring? Why serve a master when they could become the masters together? He offers not just alliance, but succession. Cast off the failures of the man upstairs. Take the prophecy and bend it. Let Dumbledore fall between them like an old statue finely toppled. Become not Voldemort's weapon, but his replacement. Harry recoils, and the recoil is not from power itself. Power is the air he has breathed since childhood, the plan whispered over maps and prophecies. He knows the temptation of it. He has seen how easily a word in Parseltongue can still a room. His revulsion is for the coldness behind Riddle's eyes, that perfect polished absence that has always terrified him when Voldemort looks at him as if he were both son and tool. Not Dumbledore, who had watched him across a desk with sorrow and suspicion. Not Hagrid, who had clapped his shoulder with rough, bewildered affection. Not Sirius, who had stared at him with the hungry hope of a man who wanted a family back. Only Voldemort had ever looked at him the way Riddle does now, as an answer to a problem. When the basilisk rises, it is more than a monster. It is the embodiment of that answer, the weapon Harry was bred to command. Every order he does not give, every time he chooses to shield Ginny's small cooling body instead of stepping aside, is a refusal of the role written for him. The battle is brutal and inelegant. Poison in his arm, fangs in his flesh, the sword in his hand heavier than any wand. Each strike is a denial. I will not be your heir. Each wound is a cost stamped into his body for choosing to protect instead of to rule. The serpent's death is the death of one possible self. When he drives the fang into the diary, the scream that tears the chamber is not just Riddle's. It is a Horcrux dying, yes, but it is also the shattering of a narrative of inevitable darkness. Ink spills like blood. The boy in the pages flickers and collapses. The grave was empty after all, but not in the way Voldemort believed. Harry staggers, half dead and more alive than he has ever been, and understands with sudden, terrible clarity. He has just struck at Voldemort's soul, and at the quiet, insidious certainty that he was always meant to become the same. If he can kill this piece, what else in the story can he rewrite? Harry will remember the basilisk first, the taste of blood and stone, the echo of Ginny's shallow breathing as the diary's replica soul burned away. But the true wound is waiting upstairs, in the circular office where portraits pretend to sleep, and one old wizard waits with a plan he does not dare name. The grave was empty in the chamber, in a way Voldemort never intended. A fragment of his magic died there. This is important. Dumbledore can feel it the moment Harry steps through the door, pale and shaking, the sword still stained, the boy's magic shivering around him like something newly unchained. He knew, long before this night, that Harry was bound to Tom Riddle more deeply than prophecy alone. Now the bond hums in the air like a curse half-spoken. He does not rush, he does not console. Not Dumbledore, who had watched too many children become weapons because adults spoke too quickly. Instead, he asks Harry to sit and lets the silence stretch until the boy's suspicion arrives before his words do. Harry studies the room as if it is a battlefield. The silver instruments, the phoenix, the shelves of books. Every twinkle of Dumbledore's eye is a calculated lie, every gentle word part of some grand manipulation. That is the story Voldemort has carved into him, with lessons and punishments and soft, poisonous praise. Dumbledore knows this. He must step carefully, or he will only harden the Dark Lord's work. So he begins, not with Harry, but with Tom. He speaks of the orphanage, of a boy who hoarded secrets like treasure, who used magic as a blade long before he had a wand. He speaks of stolen trinkets, of rabbits hanging limp, of children who learn to fear the quiet child in the corner. Then he adds what Voldemort never told: the loneliness, the cold corridors, the absence of any hand reaching back. Pain is named, but not excused. Being hurt explains a man, Dumbledore says softly. But it does not absolve him. Suffering is not a license for cruelty. It is a crossroads. Harry's jaw tightens. He hears an accusation aimed at his father and at himself. He has been taught that Dumbledore weaponizes pity, that he will drag Tom Riddle's past into the light to diminish the Dark Lord's greatness. Yet some part of him, the part that watched Ginny Weasley fade beside a cursed diary, recognizes the boy in the orphanage as something other than legend, as someone who might have chosen differently. Dumbledore feels the magic between them stir, a strange echoing resonance. Horcrux is a word he will not speak yet, but the theory coils behind his eyes. A deeper link, a shard of soul. If he names it now, will Voldemort feel the knowledge through Harry like a tug on a shared nerve? Will the Dark Lord tighten his hold, change his plan, bury his remaining anchors deeper? So he withholds. Selective truth becomes its own kind of charm, a fragile ward against premature revelation. "You are not Tom," he says at last, voice stripped of all whimsy. "You are not defined by the man who raised you, nor by the magic he forced upon you. You may share a scar, even a shadow. But you are alive, Harry. You may choose." Harry looks at him, eyes dark with doubt and something dangerously close to hope. Which voice is lying? Which grave of stories must he dig up to know? And somewhere deep inside, something in the link listens as well. Voldemort's. Or Harry's. The difference will decide who dies. The grave of childhood stories is never as quiet as it seems. In third year, it cracks. News of Sirius Black's escape does not find Harry cowering beneath a blanket. It finds him sharpened. He has been raised on a single, carefully tended narrative. Sirius Black, Dumbledore's creature. The traitor who opened the door at Godric's Hollow and stood aside while the old man orchestrated James and Lily Potter's deaths. So, when he hears the name on the Muggle news in whispered wizarding corridors, he does not feel fear. He feels recognition and cold, surgical fury. Voldemort is waiting for that reaction. This is important. In the privacy of their next meeting, he does not forbid Harry from hunting the escaped prisoner. He commissions him. Find Black. Follow whatever trail Hogwarts offers you. Learn which auras, which order remnants, which former students still answer Dumbledore's call. Extract everything. And if Black is spent, if he has nothing left but regret and madness, kill him. Do it for your parents. Do it for me. Murder in this plan is not only vengeance, it is examination. A final, irrevocable proof of loyalty. Then Remus Lupin steps onto the Hogwarts Express, shabby and self-contained, and quietly ruins the clean lines of their design. Lupin knew James and Lily in the unguarded years before war and prophecy. He tells Harry small stories that no one in Riddle Manor ever bothered to fabricate. James falling off his broom from laughing too hard. Lily, wand ink-stained, arguing with Slughorn about the ethics of a charm that could mimic a living person too perfectly. Lily was a charms prodigy, he says once, almost to himself. The words land like a stone dropped into deep water. Replica, protection, sacrifice that is not quite what it seems. Harry files it away, and something in him will not stop turning it over. Lupin's memories do not sound like the parents Voldemort described, reckless, arrogant, easily manipulated by Dumbledore. They sound like people who questioned plans, who distrusted simple stories about good and evil. Each defense lesson becomes a quiet fracture. Which version is the lie? By the time the shrieking Shack Knight arrives, Harry is primed for violence, wand steady, objectives clear. But the room he steps into is not an execution chamber. It is an echoing hall of mirrors. Sirius, half-starved, raves about Peter Pettigrew and a betrayal that has nothing to do with Dumbledore. Lupin backs him, voice shaking, offering dates, passwords, the map that knew every footstep at Hogwarts. Not Dumbledore, who had supposedly commanded the murder. Not Hagrid, who had carried a baby from a ruined house. Not Sirius, who had allegedly sold his friends. All their roles invert at once. The grave was empty. Not just in Godric's Hollow, but in Harry's mind, where the neat burial of the past splits and spills. Voldemort's story calls to his training, to his scar. Dumbledore's distant benevolence whispers from the edges. Sirius pleads as godfather. Lupin pleads as witness. Harry doesn't choose a side that night. He chooses doubt. He leaves third year without a home to run to, without a godfather's promised escape. He leaves with something far more dangerous. The knowledge that both the Dark Lord who raised him and the headmaster who opposes him have lied, edited, concealed. The war is no longer a simple line between two wands. It is a question of which truth he will help bury next. Tonight, we follow Harry into the one kind of battlefield he has never been trained for. Not a duel, not a graveyard. A corridor where time itself can be bent but not broken, and where the enemy is the boy he was a few hours ago. The Time Turner is not for him a clever academic charm or an amusing loophole for overachieving students. It is the first time the world admits, even briefly, that the story might be rewritten. The chain is cold against his throat. The turning of the tiny hourglass a dry rasp like bone on stone. And with each rotation he feels something he has never allowed himself to feel about Godric's Hollow, about the crib, about the green light, possibility. He stands in the shadows by Hagrid's hut and watches himself cross the grass. The earlier Harry moves with a coiled, brittle purpose, every step sharpened by instructions given in a different lair, under a different gaze. Voldemort had a plan for this night. Observe. Intervene if necessary. Prove you can act without being seen. Prove you can be a weapon in more than one direction. From the darkness, the Harry who has turned time back feels an odd, almost clinical detachment. That boy stalking across the lawn, jaw set, wand hand tight, is familiar and alien at once. He sees the anger in his shoulders, the eagerness under the fear, the way his eyes keep flicking as if searching for an invisible mentor's approval. This is important. He is watching his own indoctrination in motion, a living replica of the lessons poured into him in whispers and punishments. He knew he was angry. He did not know how much he looked like the man who raised him when he moved in for the kill. And inevitably, standing there with hours suddenly malleable, his mind slips further back, If 3 hours can be rewound, why not 3 years? Why not 13? What would it mean to step into that cottage in Godric's Hollow, to stand between Voldemort and the crib, to raise his wand not as a child, but as the trained instrument the Dark Lord forged? Would he defend the baby or the man? Would he hesitate? Dumbledore's instructions echo like a counter-curse. You must not be seen. You must not change what has already happened. The limits of time magic are framed as rules, as practical safeguards against paradox and catastrophe. But Harry hears something else buried beneath. Some things cannot be undone. They can only be answered differently the next time a wand is raised. The grave was empty in his life long before he ever visited Godric's Hollow. No parents to bury, no childhood to exhume, only roles others had written for him. Savior, servant, weapon. Not Dumbledore, who had watched him from a distance, and not Voldemort, who had kept him close, ever asked who Harry might choose to be if the script were torn. Watching himself save Buckbeak, hearing his own Patronus roar across the lake, he realizes a quieter, more radical possibility. He cannot step between the crib and the curse. He cannot reach back and drag James and Lily out of the blast. But he can perhaps step between his current self and the future both ones expect. He leaves the night with more than a rescued hippogriff. He leaves with the first fragile conviction that time may not grant him his parents, but it might still grant him himself. The grave was empty in another sense now. Not the one in Godric's Hollow, but the quiet private grave where Harry had been bearing versions of himself since childhood. Third year had cracked the soil. Fourth year would dig. When his name came out of the Goblet of Fire, the hall did not simply gasp. It recalculated. This is important. In canon, the boy who lived is the bewildered outsider, clearly a victim of someone else's plot. Here, the boy raised in shadow is already a question mark written across the entire school. The story in every whisper is the same. Whose piece just moved? Some students look first to the staff table and see Dumbledore's face, grave and intent, and they decide it must be him. A calculated spectacle to bind Harry more tightly to his side, to parade his protégé before the world. Others remember the mark that burned on their parents' arms, the way magic feels thin and sharp around Harry when he is angry, and they think of another master. They suspect the Dark Lord has finally reached into Hogwarts openly. Harry himself does not know. That is the cruelty. He stands with his hand still tingling from the parchment, and he cannot tell whether this is Dumbledore's test or Voldemort's summons. Both men have used him. Both men have withheld the truth. Both have a plan that began before he was old enough to walk. Voldemort's response is immediate, though unseen. The tournament is perfect, international, public, bound by ancient charm and tradition. He does not need to skulk in Albanian forests while others tell his story. He can let the maze and the lake and the dragons become his stage. Either the boy triumphs under impossible pressure and steps forward as the Dark Lord's chosen champion, or Dumbledore dies in a blaze of orchestrated catastrophe with Harry's wand raised at the final moment, executioner or heir. Either role will do. Dumbledore moves just as quickly, but in the open. Not Dumbledore, who had once decided to let Harry grow at a distance, trusting that love and school and time might loosen Voldemort's grip. That luxury is gone. He walks the grounds with Harry before the dragons. He stands too long at the edge of the lake, explaining gillyweed and bubblehead charms with a patience that is almost desperate. He is not only keeping the boy alive, he is demonstrating a kind of steady, visible care Voldemort has never bothered to imitate. Yet the cost of that visibility is isolation. Classmates resent the special treatment, the spotlight, the way every adult gaze bends toward him. The press, already fascinated by the Dark Lord's ward, now paints him as a manufactured champion, a replica hero assembled by two rival generals. Not Hagrid, who had once been a simple refugee, can protect him from the Prophet's headlines. Not Sirius, who had promised freedom, can change the fact that both his father figures demand trust while refusing him the prophecy, the full truth of his scar, the nature of the magic that binds him. By the time Hedges rise for the third task, Harry understands that the maze is only the visible geometry. The real labyrinth is inside him. Which voice will he follow when the paths fork and no one is watching? Which wand will his hand remember? Somewhere beyond the last turn, a portkey waits. So does a choice neither master truly believes he can make. They are both wrong. The portkey does not just pull Harry from the maze. It drags him backward through his own life. The jerk behind his navel becomes a hand in his chest, wrenching him out of every room, every lesson, every whispered endearment that ever began with, "My son." They land in a graveyard. Of course they do. The air is cold, damp with the breath of old stone and older names, the ground crowded with markers to stories finished and forgotten. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow, but here the graves are full, and Harry understands with a shudder that he is standing in the heart of Voldemort's preferred landscape, death arranged like a family tree. This is important. The boy who has been raised to see death as a tool now stands in a place where death is the only honest record. No propaganda, no revised history, just dates, just endings. He watches the ritual begin with a practiced soldier's eye and a child's dawning horror. The small twisted thing that is Voldemort's current body, the bone from the grave, the flesh from the servant, the blood from Harry's arm. Wormtail whimpers. Harry flinches at the knife. Voldemort does not look at either of them. Not once. Lily was a charms prodigy, but even she could not have crafted a ward strong enough to protect a child from this sight. The green light, the smoke, the slow unfurling of a figure he has known in fragments his entire life. When Voldemort stands reborn, pale and terrible in the moonlight, Harry sees not a father emerging from trial, but a man who has always considered bodies, his, theirs, as ingredients. Voldemort touches Harry's face, almost absently, checking the scar as one might inspect a replica for flaws. Then he turns away, cloak whispering over stone, and calls his Death Eaters home. They apparate in circles, masks gleaming, knees bending. Names are spoken, punishments promised, oaths renewed. And then, before them all, Voldemort drags Harry forward by the shoulder. "Behold my work," he says, voice silken and cold. "The boy the prophecy named. The child I took from the ruins and remade. My weapon, my answer to Dumbledore. There is no son now, no private softness, only ownership, only proof. Not Dumbledore, who had once dreamed of guiding a gifted child. Not Hagrid, who had once carried a baby from a different grave. Not Sirius, who had once sworn to raise his godson as his own. None of them are named, only Voldemort, and the thing he claims he has made. The duel is not a duel. It is a demonstration. Voldemort forces Harry's hand up, commands curses, barks corrections, like a tutor refining a lesson. Show them what I have taught you. Show them why Dumbledore must fall. Harry obeys. At first. His wand moves with drilled precision. His mouth shapes words that taste of ash. But inside, the labyrinth shifts. A half-second hesitation here. A deliberately weakened hex there. A shield raised not quite quickly enough. Inviting pain he has been trained to avoid. Tiny betrayals, invisible to all but himself. Then their spells meet. Wand core calls to wand core, brother to brother, and the graveyard fills with a strange, resisting music. Golden light binds their wands, a column of impossible magic, and Harry's knees buckle under the weight of it. The world narrows to the trembling line between them. Shapes spill from Voldemort's wand, echoes. Figures made of light and memory. A man with untidy hair and haunted eyes. A woman with fierce green eyes that match Harry's own. They are not charm work, not polished replicas crafted for a plan. They are raw, unedited fragments of truth, pulled from the moment Voldemort tried to end them. James speaks. Lily speaks. And in the space between their words, Harry finally understands that the story he has lived is not the only one that was ever alive. The graveyard goes silent around the locked ones. The green and red thread of magic hums, a taut, vibrating line between murderer and weapon, between father and son by proclamation, not by blood. And then the replicas of the dead step out of Voldemort's wand. They are not hazy comforts. They are not the gentle, half-formed shades of a bedtime story. James and Lily emerge with a clarity that feels obscene in this place. Robes torn as they were that night, hair disordered by panic, eyes bright with the last things they ever saw. This is important, because what rises here are not curated memories Voldemort has replayed for Harry, polished narratives of a necessary sacrifice. These are witnesses. Lily was a charms prodigy, but even she could not have designed this. Priori, Incantatem does not care for propaganda or plan. It drags the truth out of the wand, the sequence of spells exactly as they were cast. James looks at Voldemort first, and something in his spectral jaw hardens. Then he turns to Harry, and the grave might as well fall away. Harry, James says, and the name is not an order, not a title, not a weapons designation. It is an ache. Listen to your mother. Lily steps closer along the line of magic, as near to touching him as the graveyard's rules will allow. Her voice is soft, but it slices through every lesson, every lecture, every cold reassurance the Dark Lord has ever given. Dumbledore tried to protect us, she tells him. He begged us to hide. He was not our enemy. Voldemort came to kill you, Harry. He came to kill us. There was no shared plan, no agreement, no noble bargain. The words strike harder than any curse. Harry has been told since childhood that his parents chose a higher cause, that they entrusted him to Voldemort so the prophecy could be controlled, that Dumbledore, who had supposedly orchestrated their deaths, was the true monster. Now, in seconds, that foundation fractures. If Dumbledore did not murder them, if Voldemort did not spare them in some terrible alliance, then what has his entire life been? The grave was empty. The story he was given was, too. His world tilts. The wand shudders in his hand. He remembers lessons whispered in shadowed halls, the way Voldemort spoke of necessary losses, the way Death Eaters nodded when he repeated the lines. He remembers Snape's unreadable gaze, the way Dumbledore watched him at Hogwarts with sorrow instead of hatred. What if the headmaster's fear had never been of Harry, but for him? James leans in, urgency sharpening his features. "You have to run when you can," he says. "Live. Choose your own side. We loved you because you were our son, not because of a prophecy, not because of what you could do to him." "Remember that," Lily breathes. "Whatever he told you, you were never his creation." When the connection breaks and the graveyard explodes back into noise and pain, Harry is no longer only the boy tortured on a tombstone. He is a child standing amid the ruins of his own history, not Hagrid, who had carried him in those first visions of a different life, not Sirius, who had once been painted as a traitor. None of them lied to him. One man did. He returns to Hogwarts, not just marked by curses and screams, but carrying a colder wound, the knowledge that his entire childhood has been built on a deliberate, monstrous deception, and that the next choice he makes will not be the one Voldemort trained him for. He returns to Hogwarts with a new kind of silence around him. It is not the quiet of fear. It is the quiet of someone who has finally seen the architect behind the curtain and found that every brick of his life was laid for a purpose that was never his. This is important. The grave was empty in his mind now, not just the grave in Godric's Hollow, but every symbolic grave where he had buried questions, doubts, inconvenient flashes of tenderness from a monster who called himself Father. The story was not simple anymore. It had never been. In the aftermath of the graveyard, Harry is angrier, more volatile, and more alone than he has ever been. He distrusts Voldemort because he has seen the ritualistic cruelty beneath the cultivated affection, the way the Dark Lord spoke of him as a weapon before an audience. He distrusts Dumbledore because the old man knew there was a link, knew there was a plan, and still chose riddles over answers. The Order of the Phoenix gathers around this fracture, not as a polished resistance, but as a rough, living thing stitched together by grief and stubborn hope. At Grimmauld Place, Harry walks through rooms that smell of dust and old magic, past black family tapestries that hiss out bloodlines like curses. Here, for the first time, he encounters a community that does not see him only as the Dark Lord's heir or the boy who lived, but as a boy who is tired and dangerous and still, inexplicably, worth feeding and listening to. Not Dumbledore, who had orchestrated strategies from a height. Not Hagrid, who had carried him from rubble, but could not follow him into this psychological war. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of stolen summers and godfatherly mischief. The Order as a whole becomes something else, an alternative family structure, flawed and secretive, yet rooted in a kind of care that does not demand worship. Dumbledore makes his great mistake in this year. Faced with the growing burn of the scar and the deepening mental link, he chooses distance as a charm against corruption. He averts his eyes in corridors. He sends messages through others. He believes that by stepping back, he is shielding the boy from Voldemort's mind. Harry reads it differently. Abandonment again. Manipulation again. Another adult deciding what truths he is allowed to hold. Voldemort does not make that mistake. He steps closer through the link. Night after night, he floods Harry with visions. The crack of a training wand on a child's wrist. The cold praise after a successful curse. The rare, almost gentle hand on his shoulder after a mission well executed. Lily was a charms prodigy, but even she could not have woven illusions this intimate. These memories are real. Around them, Voldemort builds fresh lies, whispered images of Dumbledore's supposed plan to use Harry as a martyr, a sacrificial replica to inspire the world once he is dead. Harry stands in the dim hall of Grimmauld Place, surrounded by black relics that celebrate control and blood and destiny. Every adult in his life has tried to make him into something: a savior, a weapon, a symbol. He realizes that the next allegiance he swears will not just decide the war, it will decide whether he ever belongs to himself. So when the next vision comes, when the snake's eye view coils around a dark corridor and a man Harry cares about falls to his knees, who will he believe? The first time Snape raises his wand and says, "Legilimens," Harry does not see corridors or snakes or a grave in a churchyard. He sees a nursery lit by green fire. This is important, because occlumency in this timeline is not simply the art of closing one's mind to a distant enemy. It is the art of slamming doors on the man who once taught you to walk, who corrected your wand grip with cold hands and colder praise, who bent over your cradle and whispered a prophecy back to you as if it were a bedtime story. The memories surge up under Snape's magic in jagged fragments. A small chair in a stone chamber, legs dangling as Voldemort circles, lecturing about power and purity with the patient cadence of a tutor. A lesson in Cruciatus theory delivered while a stunned rabbit twitches on the flagstones. A rare evening when the Dark Lord conjures a perfect phoenix replica of green flame, lets it land on Harry's wrist, and says, almost gently, "You are mine and I am yours." Harry's shame is not in the punishments, it is in the warmth that floods him at those remembered words. Not Dumbledore, who had tried to warn the boy about the dangers of shared minds. Not Hagrid, who had spoken of you-know-who as a monster and nothing else. Not Sirius, who had imagined James's son raised rough but loved. None of them knew that the worst scars were instructional, carefully inked into a child's sense of self. Snape sees it all. He sees Harry flinch before the curse is cast. Not from fear of pain, but fear of disappointing his father. He sees the calculated deprivation, the sudden surgical tenderness. He sees Voldemort kneel so they're eye to eye and say, "The world will fear you, Harry, but I will always understand you." And something in Severus Snape, already a ruin of guilt and old vows, fractures further. Lily was a charms prodigy, but occlumency is not a charm. It is a discipline of will and identity. As the sessions grind on, Harry's progress is not measured in how quickly he can throw Snape out, but in how he begins to name what rises. This feeling is mine. That impulse is his. This is important. He starts to build internal architecture. Not walls of blankness, but rooms. In one, the scripts Voldemort wrote for him: weapon, heir, executioner. In another, smaller, stubbornly lit, the things that make him feel alive without permission. Ron's laugh, Hermione's hand on his arm. The way his magic steadies when he acts to protect, not to dominate. The pattern interrupts one night when the intrusion is not Snape's. Harry is in the pensive quiet of his own mind, practicing, when the serpent thought slithers in. A corridor, a man kneeling, the familiar pull to obey. Only this time, his trained response is different. Instead of following, he recognizes the texture of the command, the cadence of "you will come" that has ruled him since infancy. He refuses. He gathers the rooms he has built, the names he has chosen, the shame he has faced and not fled from, and he pushes back. The vision shatters, the corridor dissolves. For a heartbeat, Voldemort is the one recoiling. Harry opens his eyes on Snape's office floor, chest heaving, scar burning, but quiet. The connection is there, but it is no longer a leash. For the first time, the thought forms, clear and almost blasphemous. My mind is mine, not the Dark Lord's, not the prophecies. And the war, very quietly, changes direction. The grave in Harry's mind was empty now. The leash had snapped. In its place, something colder, clearer stepped forward. The Department of Mysteries was the physical echo of that inner break. Shelves of prophecies like glass skulls, spinning planets casting grave light, corridors that did not care who called himself master. Here, every competing story about Harry collided at once. Order against Death Eaters, Dumbledore's quiet, burdened plan against Voldemort's ruthless, meticulous design. A boy raised as a weapon, standing among rooms built to study the deepest questions of magic and fate. They fought in fragments. A jet of green in the Hall of Prophecy, a shattering orb, the high cold laugh of Bellatrix like a cracked charm. Ron dragged away by tendrils of thought, a Hermione crumpling under a silent curse. Each spell was not only an attack, but an argument. You belong to us. You are our symbol, our proof, our instrument. And at the center, Harry, who had called Voldemort father and had been taught to see Dumbledore as the final obstacle, found himself guarding a dusty sphere that whispered his own name. When the glass finally broke and the voice spilled out, it was almost anticlimactic. No thunder, no divine verdict, just words old and careful coiling through the wreckage. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, marked as his equal. Neither can live while the other survives. This is important, but not in the way either man had told him. He heard it not as a script, but as a riddle. Equal could mean servant, or rival, or mirror. Neither can live while the other survives could be read as doom, or as permission, or as a warning about what happened when two stories try to occupy the same life. Had Voldemort ever considered that? Had Dumbledore? Later, in the headmaster's office, with Fawkes watching like a silent witness, Dumbledore finally spoke the truth. Not Dumbledore, who had always seemed so certain now. His voice shook. He admitted that he had kept the prophecy from Harry out of fear. Fear of breaking him. Fear of provoking Voldemort. Fear of his own tendency to play chess with lives. He confessed that he had underestimated how a man like Voldemort would twist a half-heard prophecy into a lifelong plan of possession instead of murder. How he had imagined a grave and a martyr, not a living replica molded in the Dark Lord's image. He should have treated Harry as a partner, he said, not a pawn, not a protected child, an equal mind. Harry listened, and instead of collapsing under the weight of destiny, he went very still. It was almost eerie, the way the calm settled over him, because he knew now that both of his would-be fathers had been playing the same game with different colors. Voldemort with terror and conditional affection. Dumbledore with secrecy and sacrificial logic. Both had looked at the same sentence and seen a tool. If someone must die because of this prophecy, Harry thought, it will not be on their terms. His life would not be measured in Dumbledore's guilt or Voldemort's ambition. He would choose the ground, the time, the meaning. The prophecy was no longer a chain, it was a mirror. And Harry Potter, for the first time, began to decide what kind of man he wanted that reflection to show when the final spell was cast. Sixth year did not begin with wonder. It began with calculation. Harry stepped back into Hogwarts, not as a boy swept along by a legendary story, but as a weapon who had seen the hands that forged him and finally questioned the shape of the blade. He wouldn't be moved across the board anymore. He would move. This is important, because once he named the prophecy a mirror instead of a chain, he began to study not only magic, but power itself. Who held it, how they concealed it, how they justified the bodies that accumulated like stones around their grand designs. Not Dumbledore, who had spoken of greater goods while leaving a child in a monster's care. Not Voldemort, who called that monstrosity love. In class, Harry still raised his wand. In private, he raised his standards. He watched Dumbledore's lessons on Voldemort's past with a double gaze, seeing both the orphan who carved himself into a tyrant and the headmaster who now curated that history for a purpose. Every memory became a case study of charisma, of fear, of the quiet gravity of a well-timed silence. What was leadership and what was simply control in finer robes? The Half-Blood Prince's book arrived in his life like an echo. The cramped handwriting in the margins was ruthless, efficient, impatient with wasted motion or needless suffering if it did not serve the spell's success. It sounded, at times, like Voldemort teaching him to cut first and ask questions never. Yet Harry did not simply obey the ink. He filtered it. He used the improved jinxes, but not on those who could not defend themselves. He learned the shortcuts in brewing, then applied that precision to healing drafts as often as to hexes. When he stumbled on Sectum Sempra, the script almost humming with promise, he did not cast it at once. He wrote beside it in his own hand, "Only if there is no other way." The grave was empty where his conscience might have been if Voldemort's lessons had fully taken. It was not. Something remained alive there. With Dumbledore, he delved into Horcruxes, into the obscene arithmetic of souls divided and hidden. Together they traced rings, diaries, lockets, each object a testament to a man who mistook fragmentation for immortality. Outwardly, Harry was the diligent pupil. Inwardly, he asked a forbidden question. If this was how Voldemort anchored himself, could the same knowledge unmoor that hold forever? Could understanding the architecture of another's immortality become the blueprint of his own escape? Snape complicated everything. Lily was a charms prodigy, and now Harry saw the man who had loved her, betrayed her, begged for her son's protection, and then trained that son in poison and defense. Snape's past with Lily, his role in carrying the prophecy to Voldemort, his seething obedience to Dumbledore, all made him a dark mirror. A half-blood divided. A man weaponized, then told to live with it. And in the shadowed corridors, Draco Malfoy stalked the year with white-knuckled desperation, attempting murder with shaking hands. Watching Draco fumble with cursed necklaces and poisoned mead, Harry understood. He was not the only child turned into a charm in someone else's war, not the only replica of another man's will. If Draco succeeded, Dumbledore would die on another's timetable. If Draco failed, Voldemort would break him to pieces. Between those two graves, Harry stood and realized he had to choose what kind of adult would step away from this battlefield. The one they had designed, or someone else entirely. And as spring crept toward the astronomy tower, Harry began to sketch a plan that neither master had anticipated. The cave came first. The tower was only its echo. Harry followed Dumbledore into the black throat of the cliff, and watched step by step as legend unraveled into something painfully human. The greatest wizard of the age bled on stone to wake old magic, drank poison to reach a locket, and begged in a cracked whisper for a mercy that never came. This is important. Harry had seen Voldemort afraid, raging at the grave of his own mortality. He had never seen Dumbledore like this. The Inferae rose like a drowned army. The green fire on the lake cast sickly light over Dumbledore's face, hollowed by pain and potion, and still the old man tried to shield him. Not with spells alone, but with silence. Half-truths about Horcruxes, careful omissions about the prophecy. A trembling hand that clutched Harry's arm and said, almost pleading, that he was so very glad Harry was with him. Harry knew, with a clarity that felt like ice, that both of his supposed masters had been playing a long game with his life. On the astronomy tower, that game finally reached its visible board. Dumbledore stood, wandless and cornered, framed by lightning and stone. Draco's hand shook. The mark on his arm and the fear in his eyes were both chains forged by Voldemort's will. And somewhere below, Snape climbed the stairs with the weight of 2 oaths pressing on his chest. Not Dumbledore, who had spent years arranging pieces for a death he believed would save a boy. Not Voldemort, whose plan coiled invisibly through every corridor. Snape, who had tried to atone by becoming a replica of loyalty on both sides at once. Harry, frozen beneath the invisibility cloak by Dumbledore's silent spell, watched it all. He watched the offer of sanctuary. He watched Draco's refusal. He watched Snape arrive, eyes like shuttered windows, and lift his wand. When the green light struck, it did not feel like a surprise. It felt like the inevitable fulfillment of a bargain made long before Harry was old enough to speak. Grief hit first, hot and raw, then anger, colder, sharper, not only at Snape and not only at Voldemort, at the whole architecture of sacrifice that had been built over his head. But under it, braided through, there was a grim understanding. Dumbledore had chosen this. Voldemort had anticipated it. The grave was empty before the body fell. The space where an unmanipulated childhood should have been had never been filled. Harry could have sworn revenge. He could have collapsed into despair and let the prophecy dictate the rest of his story. Instead, immobilized and invisible, he made a quieter decision. He would not let this death be another liver for Voldemort, another justification for Dumbledore's secrets, another charm on the chain around his neck. When the body fell and the tower emptied, Harry finally moved. He turned away from the place where Dumbledore had died and from the idea of himself as the Order's loyal soldier. He would hunt Horcruxes, yes. He would face Voldemort, yes. But on his own terms, not as anyone's weapon, not as the prophecy's puppet. What does a boy raised by a Dark Lord become when he steps out of every shadow at once? The answer would not be written at Hogwarts. The answer would not be written at Hogwarts. It would be written in forests and fields and frozen ditches. In the long, thin days when Harry, Ron, and Hermione were not just fugitives, but something stranger. 3 young people with no house, no master, no curriculum, trying to build an ethical framework in a world where every adult example had failed them. Not Dumbledore, who had shaped Harry's life with half-truths and prophecy, and then died, leaving a will that felt more like a riddle than a farewell. Not Hagrid, who had been kind but unquestioning, who carried the stories he had been given like stones in his pockets. Not Sirius, who had loved Harry but wanted him to be James's replica, a boy pressed into the outline of a dead man. The grave was empty of reliable guides. This is important. Around the campfires and cold cups of tea, they argued about what was right when the law itself was corrupt. Was stealing from Death Eater's theft or reclamation? Was using dark magic to destroy Horcruxes a contamination or a necessary wound? Every choice felt like a charm cast into a fog of uncertainty, the consequences invisible until it was too late. Then the Deathly Hallows legend entered their orbit and warped it. The Elder Wand, promising victory through superior power, was the purest distillation of Voldemort's education, strength or death. The Resurrection Stone whispered of the past, of parents and mentors, and all the ghosts Harry had been taught to revere or resent. The invisibility cloak, which he had used for years as a child's toy and a weapon, now stood for escape itself, the temptation to slip forever out of every story others had written for him. Each hallow was a mirror, power, the past, escape. Which temptation would define him? Which had already defined him without his consent? At the same time, the Horcrux inside his scar stopped feeling like a secret inheritance and started feeling like an infestation. The dreams were sharper now, edged with a sense of otherness he could no longer mistake for intimacy. There were moments when he woke with his hand on his wand and the taste of someone else's rage in his mouth, and he knew with a cold, clinical horror that this was not a bond with a father figure. It was an invasive parasite, a piece of Voldemort's will squatting in his mind like an uninvited guest who thought he owned the house. Around low fires, they debated what it meant to kill Voldemort. Hermione spoke of justice and the restoration of a shattered world. Ron called it self-defense, the only way to keep the people they loved alive. Harry listened and thought of a childhood built as a weapon, of lessons in cruelty disguised as strength, of a prophecy he had never chosen. For him, killing Voldemort began to sound like amputation, the final act of cutting himself free from a life he had never consented to live. And slowly, another truth crystallized. To truly reject Voldemort's claim, it would not be enough to win, or to seize the Elder Wand, or to hide forever beneath the cloak. He would have to accept that his own death might be the price of being more than a weapon. The plan could no longer be survival at any cost. The plan had to be freedom, even if the grave with his name on it was finally irrevocably not a replica. He walked toward that realization like a man approaching a distant gallows, knowing that the next choice he made about life and death would decide whose story this war really belonged to. He had decided the war could no longer be about survival. Now he had to walk into the place where his childhood had pretended to be normal and see it for what it had become, a battlefield built inside a school. Hogwarts, under Snape and the Carrows, was not merely grim. It was a visible diagram of the Dark Lord's plan etched into stone and skin. Detention meant Cruciatus. History of magic meant propaganda. The Great Hall's enchanted ceiling reflected not weather, but control. Its once playful storms now a sullen, unmoving sky that pressed down on every whispered act of defiance. This is important. The castle that had taught generations of witches and wizards was now teaching something else entirely. Obedience, cruelty, the slow erosion of conscience. The students had learned their lessons well, but not all in the way the Carrows intended. As Harry slipped back into the castle's orbit, His name moved faster than his footsteps. Some stared with open relief, as if a myth had stepped out of a story and into their line of sight. Others watched with a wary, almost reverent fear. They had heard rumors that he had been raised in shadow, that he called Voldemort father, that his scar was not a wound but a brand. To some, he was a savior. To others, a dark legend finally come home. He could feel those conflicting versions of himself brushing against him like invisible hands as he walked the corridors. The boy who had shared a dormitory with Ron. The weapon trained in secret chambers to read Dumbledore's defenses. The half-truths and outright lies clung to him like another cloak, heavier than any invisibility charm. Which Harry Potter did they think had returned? Which one was actually alive? Then the castle itself answered, not with words, but with faces that did not flinch. Neville, gaunt and bruised, standing in the room of requirement as if it were a last sanctuary carved from the bones of the school. Luna, calm and luminous, as though she had always known this night would arrive. Ginny, eyes burning, not with worship, but with recognition. They did not ask which story about him was true. They simply knew him. Their trust was a quiet, devastating indictment. Not Dumbledore, who had measured Harry against prophecy and strategy. Not Voldemort, who had measured him against power and usefulness. Neville handed him a broken wand as if it were a relic. Luna spoke of hidden passages. Ginny reached for his hand without hesitation. None of them treated him as a replica of someone foretold. They treated him as a person standing in front of them, trembling and choosing. Outside, Voldemort's ultimatum rolled over the grounds like thunder. Hand over Harry Potter, or face annihilation. The grave was empty, but the threat of new graves was very real. The castle became a fortress and a stage in the same breath. Every tower a potential witness stand, every window a watching eye. This is important. Whatever he chose now would not be whispered in secret rooms. It would be spoken in spells and blood before the entire wizarding world. He walked the familiar corridors one more time, each stone a memory, each turn a reckoning. First broomstick, first friend, first lie. Every manipulation pressed against him like weight added to a scale, balanced only by 100 small acts of defiance he had barely noticed making. At the far end of the hallway, the knight waited, holding its breath. He was not walking toward a duel. He was walking toward a decision. And somewhere in the dark, two masters, two fathers in all but name, waited to see which story he would finally choose to kill. The forest did not welcome him. It received him the way an old wound receives pressure, with a dull, inevitable ache that had been waiting for this exact touch. He knew now, knew with the cold, lucid certainty of someone reading the last line of a prophecy, and finally understanding that it had always been about his body as much as his will. There was a fragment of Voldemort's soul lodged behind his scar, a parasite threaded through his magic. To kill Voldemort, that Horcrux had to die. To kill the Horcrux, Harry had to die. This is important, because in this timeline, that realization was not only about destiny, it was about custody, it was about ownership. Voldemort had raised him, shaped him, written lessons into his bones with curses and praise, and calculated conditional affection. Walking into the forest was not only walking toward death, it was walking out of that custody, refusing to be a vessel 1 second longer. The farewell to Ron and Hermione was almost nothing, and therefore it was everything. No speeches, No grand declaration of martyrdom. A hand on Ron's shoulder, brief and grounding, like the first time they had shared a carriage to Hogwarts, and Ron had offered him a sandwich without knowing he was offering him a life. A longer look at Hermione, whose eyes had always been sharp enough to cut through any charm, any lie, any replica of the truth. She saw more than he said. She always had. He did not tell them the full plan. He did not say, "I am going to let him kill me so he can never use me again." He only said enough to make them stop arguing. The rest lived in the silence between them, in the way Hermione's hands shook when she let go, in the way Ron did not say goodbye, only, "We'll be here." The forest closed around him, and memory walked beside him like a second shadow. Lessons in the dark lair. Voldemort's voice, soft as poison, asking, "Who will you be when the world fears your name?" First days at Hogwarts. The Sorting Hat whispering of Slytherin and power, and Harry choosing against the grain of his upbringing without quite knowing why. Not Dumbledore, who had watched him with that terrible, measuring kindness. Not Hagrid, who had shown him the grave of his parents, never knowing the grave was empty in another story. Not Sirius, who had almost become something like a real father before Azkaban, and manipulation and divided loyalties shattered that fragile possibility. Pattern interrupt. He almost turned back. For a heartbeat, the idea of running, of refusing both masters, flared like sudden lightning through the branches. What if he fled? Vanished, lived small and nameless and free. But freedom purchased by leaving Voldemort alive would only be another cage, built from other people's graves. The clearing opened like a wound. Voldemort waited at its center, ringed by Death Eaters and the cold, watchful eyes of creatures who had learned to love despair. He did not greet Harry as a son. He greeted him as an experiment returning to the laboratory. "Come," Voldemort said, voice almost pleased. "You understand at last. You were made for this." In his mind, the prophecy still bent to his will. Killing Harry here, by choice, by ritual, would finish the story on his terms. The weapon that failed would still serve as a key. Harry stepped forward, and for the first time since childhood, he felt nothing of the old reflexive obedience. No flinch at the hiss of his name, no thrill of approval to be standing at the Dark Lord's side. Only a profound, exhausted clarity. He thought of his mother's arms he had never truly known, of James's laugh he had only heard in echoes, of a life Voldemort had edited and redacted until it served a single narrative. Kill Dumbledore, crown the Dark Lord. Accept your place as my creation. He would not. When he closed his eyes, it was not in submission. It was in authorship. He accepted the green light of the killing curse as the final, ultimate act of reclaiming his own story, tearing his magic and his soul out of Voldemort's design. The forest watched. The curse flew. And for one suspended instant, Harry Potter was more alive in his choice than he had ever been under his master's hand. The forest vanished. The pain vanished. The command vanished. In its place, whiteness, a vast, mist-soft expanse that looked at first glance like a replica of King's Cross Station, washed clean of all its grime and noise. The iron arches were suggestion rather than structure, the tracks a faint shadow beneath the gleaming floor. Sound was muted, as if the world were holding its breath. For the first time in his life, Harry's mind was not under siege. This is important, because here, between life and death, between curse and consequence, there was no wand in his hand, no Dark Lord at his back, no headmaster weighing him with blue, appraising eyes. There was only the boy who had walked into the killing curse by choice and the man he might yet become. Dumbledore appeared as though stepping through the mist, not with the theatricality of a summoned spirit, but with the weary inevitability of an old truth finally spoken aloud. His robes were simple, his hands were empty. His gaze, when it met Harry's, held neither twinkle nor strategy. "Harry," he said, and there was an entire graveyard of regrets in that single word. He confessed because there was no longer any point in concealment. He spoke of the prophecy he had chosen to weaponize, of the boy he had allowed to be raised by his enemy because he had believed that proximity to Voldemort's magic might one day make Harry the perfect counterweight. Not Dumbledore, who had once told himself he would never again move children-like pieces on a board. Yet he had. He admitted that every offer of guidance had been laced with calculation, every withheld truth part of a larger, colder plan. He spoke, too, of love, of how affection for Harry had grown in the cracks of that plan, unwanted and undeniable, tangled with his terror of power and his hunger for redemption. He'd hoped Harry would succeed where he had failed with Grindelwald, that the boy would cleanse the stain of his youth by dying well, or living better. Harry listened. He did not kneel. He did not rage. He knew now that the story of his life had never belonged entirely to either man. He said quietly that Dumbledore had saved lives and shattered them, that he had given Harry tools and taken his childhood, that both things were true and neither would be allowed to swallow the other whole. Then he heard it, a thin, raw whimpering from beneath a distant bench. The grave was empty, but something here was not. Curled on the polished floor lay a maimed fragment, all flayed skin and shuddering breath, the last screaming shard of Voldemort's soul. It was smaller than the child he had once cradled, more helpless than the orphans Tom Riddle had despised. No grandeur, no terror, only a pitiful, broken thing that could not be comforted. Harry looked at it and felt, to his own astonishment, not devotion and not hatred, but a cold, exhausted pity. This was what had raised him. This was what had called itself father. Dumbledore told him he could go on, or go back. He framed it as a choice, but for the first time Harry saw the subtle pressure beneath the words, the old reflex of a general nudging a piece toward the line. Harry stepped away from both men. He chose to return not because prophecy demanded it, not because Dumbledore asked, not because Voldemort's design required completion, but because living and fighting and rebuilding on his own terms was the only true victory left. If he went back, it would be as neither weapon nor martyr. It would be as author. And somewhere beyond the white mist, a broken world waited to see what story he would write when he opened his eyes again. He opened his eyes on stone and ruin. The great hall was a battlefield and a grave in one. Benches overturned, banners scorched, the enchanted ceiling fractured into wild bleeding sky. Bodies lay like discarded replicas of the living along the walls, some still, some shuddering, and around the shattered center aisle the survivors formed a ragged ring. They watched as Harry stepped forward, ash-streaked, very much alive, and faced the man who had written his story in blood. Voldemort waited between the house tables as if on a throne of absence. The Death Eaters had fallen or fled. His circle was broken. Yet his posture was almost serene. He knew, or thought he knew, how this would end. Either the weapon would kneel and prove his dominion before all witnesses, or it would strike in blind obedience and confirm the prophecy as he had chosen to interpret it. "Come, Harry," he said softly. "Fulfill the plan." Harry did not raise his wand. He raised his voice. "No." One word, short, final. "I am done being your weapon, Tom." The name fell into the silence like a dropped blade. This is important. Not Dumbledore, who had spun half-truths for the supposed greater good. Not Hagrid, who had brought him into the world of magic with rough, bewildered kindness. Not Sirius, who had dreamed of godfatherhood and gotten Azkaban instead. None of them had ever spoken that name in Harry's hearing the way he spoke it now, as indictment, not revelation. He did not call him father. He called him Tom. And then, before the gathered school, he named the years. He spoke of lessons that were not lessons, but indoctrination, of punishments dressed as discipline, of the charm on his bedroom door that monitored his every movement, of the calculated affection that arrived only when he obeyed. He told them how his victories at school had been arranged, how friendships had been tested, how every kindness he offered had been measured against a ledger of usefulness. He told them how the prophecy had been recited to him like scripture, a cage of words forged into destiny. Voldemort's face did not redden. It thinned. His eyes burned with a quieter, more dangerous fury, the fury of a creator whose creation had begun to narrate itself. He tried the old tools, threats of agony for the watching crowd, promises of power if Harry would return, the invocation of the prophecy as unbreakable law. "You were made for this," he hissed. "You and I are bound. The grave was empty for a reason. There is no truth but mine." Harry stepped closer, wand finally lifting, but not to strike. "You never understood the wand," he said, and his voice carried to the rafters. "Or me." He explained calmly that the Elder One's allegiance had passed when Draco disarmed Dumbledore, and then again when Harry had wrested Draco's wand away. The legend Voldemort worshipped had already betrayed him. The weapon he trusted was never truly his. Then Harry laid bare the deeper magic, the shard of soul lodged in his scar, the choice in the forest to walk unarmed into death so that peace could be destroyed. How that willing surrender had broken not only the Horcrux, but the last hold Tom Riddle had on the boy he had tried to own. "This is important," Harry said quietly. "You built me on fear and prophecy. I rebuilt myself on choice." When their spells met, it was almost an afterthought. Green and red, twin arcs over a hall holding its breath. The Elder Wand betrayed its master. Voldemort's curse rebounded, and Tom Riddle fell like any man, his body hitting stone with no ceremony, no scream, only the dull finality of something hollow collapsing in on itself. It did not feel like triumph. It felt like the end of a lie, because in the echoing silence, as dust drifted and wands lowered, another question rose, sharp and unavoidable. Now that the weapon had refused to strike as ordered, what would he do with a world that had only ever known him as someone else's design? The silence after Voldemort fell was not peace. It was shock. It was the airless quiet of a battlefield that had not yet understood the war was over. Ash drifted in the great hall like slow grey snow. Benches lay overturned, banners torn, the stones themselves scored and blackened where wild magic had struck. Death Eaters knelt in stunned rows under hastily conjured restraints, their masks discarded, their faces bare and suddenly very human. Students clung to one another beside the bodies of friends. Teachers moved like ghosts, counting the living, naming the dead. And in the center of it all stood Harry. No longer a target, not yet a man. A weapon without a wielder, standing in the ruins of the plan that had forged him. This is important, because the world rushed almost immediately to fill that silence with a story. In one version, he was the perfect double agent, the boy who had walked willingly into the Dark Lord's shadow so he could learn its shape from the inside, the student who had sat in Dumbledore's office with careful eyes and said nothing while knowing everything. They said he had infiltrated Voldemort's inner circle, played the obedient heir, and then, at the appointed hour, turned and struck. They called him Savior. They spoke of prophecy fulfilled by design rather than accident. In another version, whispered in corridors and behind closed doors, he was something far more unsettling. Voldemort's creation. The Dark Lord's son in all but blood, branded in infancy, raised on a doctrine of fear and purity, trained as a living charm to break Dumbledore at last. In that story, he turned only at the very end, not from conviction, but from some private fracture no one could trace. The grave was empty, they said, not of bodies, but of certainty. If Voldemort could make a hero, what did heroism mean? Harry listened because there was no way not to listen, and found no home in either tale. He knew the truth was messier, more grave, and more intimate. He had been victim and participant, weapon and hand on the hilt. He had loved a monster who had taught him to kill. He had also chosen, in the end, to stop. Not Dumbledore, who had once believed that love was a protection you either possessed or lacked. Not Hagrid, who had carried him as a baby and then watched him walk at Voldemort's side. Not Sirius, who had punched stone until his knuckles bled when he heard how the boy had been raised. None of them could quite bear the full, unadorned truth of that. So Harry began with smaller truths. He went to funerals, standing at the edges where the grass was still unburnt, listening to names read over freshly turned earth. He visited the injured in the hospital wing and at St. Mungo's, sitting in quiet rooms that smelled of potions and scorched linen, holding hands when words failed. He helped repair shattered windows, reset fallen stones, lent his magic to the slow work of rebuilding Hogwarts, not as a symbol, but as a pair of steady hands. When the Ministry offered him an aura fast track, when factions murmured about leadership and reform, he refused with a calm that frightened them. Positions of power, he understood, were only new scabbards, new ways to be wielded. The pattern interrupted here. For the first time in his life, there was no prophecy dictating his next move, no Dark Lord's will written like a script beneath his skin. Choice was not an abstract word, it was an empty page. At sunrise, some weeks after the battle, he sat alone on the slope below the ruined wing of the castle. The grounds were scarred but beginning to green again, tentative blades of grass pushing through charred soil. The lake held the first light like a long, dark mirror. Behind him, the castle exhaled quietly. Owls returning, distant voices, the muted clatter of rebuilding. Harry drew his knees up, wrapped his arms around them, and watched the horizon bleed from black to grey to the faintest suggestion of gold. The future felt terrifying in its openness. A sky without wards or marks, a life not bounded by someone else's plan. He did not know who he would become if he was not a weapon. But for the first time, that ignorance felt less like failure and more like possibility. The boy who had been forged for another man's war sat on the damp grass, alive, unscripted, and unbearably free, and let the day begin without asking what it required him to destroy. History would come for him next. The war would end, the bodies would be counted, the grave markers carved, and then the quieter work would begin, deciding what exactly the world would choose to remember about the boy who had once called Voldemort father. The story would not stay his. It never does. In the first Hogwarts textbooks rushed out after the trials, his name would gleam on thick parchment, safely framed. Harry Potter, instrument of darkness turned secret agent of the light. A convenient narrative would harden line by line. The authors would linger on his final defiance, on the duel in the Great Hall, on the moment he turned his wand away from Dumbledore and toward the man who had raised him. They would mention his years in Voldemort's shadow, yes, but as a kind of elaborate undercover operation that he had always been destined to escape, rather than a childhood in which every lullaby had been a lesson in fear. Chocolate frog cards would go further. They would polish him into a replica of the old legend, a second boy who lived, whose doubts and compromises had been burned away in a single decisive spell. There would be no room on a 3-line description for the nights he had believed Dumbledore a monster, or the mornings he had woken certain that mercy was weakness. This is important. Erased complexity is its own kind of curse. The Ministry would encourage this softening. It would be safer, politically, to insist that evil had always been outside the walls, a dark figure in a graveyard, a name on forbidden posters, and never seated at the head of a family table teaching a child to say "Father." They would need Harry to be proof that corruption could not reach the core of the next generation, that their plan for reform had worked, that the magic of institutions had held. Not Dumbledore, who had once argued that power and innocence were always intertwined, but newer officials with tidy offices and careful smiles would sign off on curriculum that made the line between villain and savior look clean. Ron and Hermione would know better. They had watched him flinch at praise, had heard the cadence of Voldemort's lessons echo in his doubts. They would stand in classrooms and in crowded halls and insist that the children listen to the messier truth, that a boy can be made into a weapon by stories told at bedtime, by the slow drip of ideology, by a leader whose charisma feels like safety until it does not. They would say his name not as a symbol, but as a warning. Personal accounts would push back against the polished myth. Harry's own memoir, if he ever allowed one to be written, would be less a catalogue of battles and more an anatomy of obedience. He would describe the first time he questioned an order and the terror that followed, the way Voldemort's disappointment felt worse than any curse. In private, with his children or with young students who came to him trembling and angry, he would speak more plainly. He would tell them how easy it had been to confuse loyalty with love, command with care, destiny with the absence of choice. The grave was empty in this timeline too, in a different way. The grave where the full, unedited story should have been laid to rest in public view would instead be half-filled with comforting lies. Not Hagrid, who had once carried a baby from a ruined house, and not Sirius, who had never been given the chance to raise his godson at all, but Harry himself would be the one to stand guard over what remained, refusing to let it be buried completely. He would visit classrooms, not as a monument, but as a man who had been misused. He would talk quietly and without theatrical magic about the slow construction of monsters and martyrs. He would remind them that every prophecy is a plan someone else tries to write over a child's life, and that the bravest act is sometimes to step outside the script altogether. In the end, the most important history would not be what appeared on exam lists or card collections. It would be the culture they built in the shadow of his choices, laws that treated children as citizens rather than assets, schools that watched for the hungry eyes of would-be Dark Lords seeking apprentices, families that listened when a child said, "I am afraid of who they want me to be." It would live in the quiet decisions to interrupt cycles of fear before they hardened into fate. That work would be slow, unglamorous, and largely unnamed. No statue would commemorate it. But as Harry walked the corridors of a Hogwarts that was learning inch by inch to see its students as more than pieces on a board, he would understand that this, at last, was the only victory that mattered. A world in which no one else would be raised for the sole purpose of being pointed at a man like Dumbledore and told to destroy. The legend would remember a savior. The living would remember a boy. And in that difference, the future would be quietly, irrevocably rewritten. But if Harry's quiet refusal rewrites the future, it also exposes the man who tried to write him. Voldemort's decision to raise the child of prophecy is at its core an act of supreme arrogance. He believes that people are clay, that fear is the kiln and reward the glaze, that if you apply enough pressure, enough pain, enough carefully measured praise, you can fire a human soul into any shape you desire. This is important, because it reveals the one thing he cannot imagine, that some parts of a person do not bend. They endure. In this timeline, his parenting is not a contradiction of his ideology, but in its purest expression. He does not see a son, he sees a vessel. He treats Harry as a Horcrux in human form, an object into which he can pour knowledge, power, fragments of his own legend. The boy is a walking repository of curses and strategies, of private histories and hidden names. Voldemort is meticulous, almost tender, in the way a collector is tender with a rare artifact. And then the artifact looks back. The moment Harry begins to question, to hesitate before an order, to flinch not from pain but from causing it, the Dark Lord experiences something he has never prepared for: resistance from within his own design. The grave was empty the night he chose not to kill the baby in Godric's Hollow. The grave he digs for himself is the belief that intention is destiny. He cannot fathom that a child raised in darkness might still somehow reach for the light. This is where the irony deepens into tragedy. By claiming the prophesied child instead of destroying him, Voldemort forges his own executioner. He grants Harry intimate knowledge of his methods, his magic, his habits of thought. Harry knows which promises are lies because he has watched them being crafted. He knows which Death Eaters are loyal and which are afraid. He knows the seams in the mask. Who else could have walked into Dumbledore's office and named with terrible precision the exact pattern of attacks still to come? In canon, Voldemort underestimates love as a protective charm, a force that can rebound a killing curse and leave him less than a ghost. Here, he underestimates something quieter but just as lethal: the corrosive power of truth once it begins to seep into a carefully constructed lie. Not Dumbledore, who had spent a lifetime parsing prophecies, understands Voldemort's blind spot as clearly as the boy who has lived inside it. So he becomes, in the end, a tragic, monstrous figure. A wizard who can tear his soul, defy the grave, command serpents and storms, but cannot comprehend why the child he raised would rather die free than live as his perfect weapon. And when Harry finally turns, when the vessel refuses to be poured into any longer, the question that hangs over the battlefield is not whether Voldemort will fall, but how far his ruin will spread when his own creation steps out of his shadow. Because the first thing Harry does with that knowledge is not what anyone expects. The first thing Harry does is walk toward Dumbledore instead of away, not in surrender, in challenge. And in that small, defiant trajectory, the entire question of who Albus Dumbledore is in this darker story must be asked again, because Dumbledore has been moving toward Harry for years, relentlessly. He scours reports, interrogates Death Eaters, follows the faintest traces of a boy raised in shadow. It is Mercy, yes, the old man who once left a baby on a doorstep, now hunting for the child he failed to protect. But it is also something sharper, more self-accusatory, the conviction that one more brilliant plan might redeem the graveyard of his earlier choices. This is important. He is not only searching for Harry, he is searching for a way to believe that his life's pattern of costly gambits can still end in grace rather than ruin. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow in this timeline too, in a different sense. There is no comforting replica of parental love in Harry's past. No safe house, no Weasley kitchen to soften his edges. Dumbledore knows this long before he admits it aloud. He sees it in the way Harry watches, not with curiosity, but with calculation. In the way he flinches at kindness and relaxes at structure. And still, Dumbledore withholds. The prophecy is reduced to fragments. The Horcruxes are a half-told story. His suspicions about the boy's upbringing remain locked behind blue eyes and lemon-scented silence. The pattern is familiar. Conceal the full truth, shape the narrative, keep the child on the board. Not Dumbledore, who had once railed against Voldemort's obsession with control, recognizing how closely his own protective secrecy begins to rhyme with that same hunger. Not Hagrid, who had believed that telling Harry he was a wizard would be enough to set him free. Not Sirius, who had imagined that love alone could break any chain. None of them truly understand how similar protection and possession can look from the inside of a cage. And yet, there are fractures in Dumbledore's old habits. Moments where he chooses trust over fear and allows the boy raised by his enemy to be more than a weapon or a risk. He invites Harry into the Horcrux hunt earlier, not as a pawn, but as a partner, placing cursed rings and poisoned memories between them like shared confession. At the King's Cross limbo, when the fragment of Voldemort lies shriveled and whimpering, Dumbledore does not posture as architect. He admits his failings, his lust for the Hallows, the ways he has used children as pieces in a war he began as a young man with Gellert Grindelwald. In that white, echoing space, he refuses the easiest story, that Harry is irredeemably corrupted. Here is the limit of his magic and his mind. He cannot charm away the years of indoctrination, cannot erase the voice that called itself father, cannot predict which fragments of Voldemort's lessons Harry will keep. His power stops at the edge of Harry's will. That is the quiet horror and the quiet hope. In the end, Dumbledore's legacy in this altered war is not the perfect execution of a grand design. The plan fails, splinters, bleeds. What remains is smaller and more human. An old man standing before a boy raised in darkness and offering, without certainty or guarantee, a different story to believe in. Whether Harry accepts it and what he does with that story, once it is his, belongs to the next and final reckoning. Harry's life in this timeline can be traced like a scar across the war itself. An infant stolen from a ruined cottage. A child forged deliberately as a weapon. A teenager suspended between competing stories of who he is. And finally, a young man who chooses his own path and pays for that choice in blood, in exile, in the quiet knowledge that there was always another way he might have gone. Voldemort begins with a plan, not a tantrum. He hears the prophecy and decides that control is safer than annihilation, that molding the threat is more reliable than trying to erase it. The grave was empty because Harry is not left in Godric's Hollow or on a Surrey doorstep. He is carried to Shadow, into a world where affection is calculated and every kindness is a leash. Death Eaters become tutors and jailers, teaching curses alongside history, loyalty alongside fear. And yet, something resists. This is important. Nature does not vanish beneath nurture. It wrestles with it. Harry's innate capacity for empathy does not die when he casts his first Cruciatus at 12, coached by a father who watches his hesitation with cold interest. It flinches, it questions. It remembers the house elf who whispered jokes in the kitchen, the lowly servant who slipped him chocolate after a failed lesson. The way even terror could be briefly softened by an uncalculated human moment. Hogwarts becomes the crucible where these strands tangle. Sorted perhaps into Slytherin. As Voldemort always intended, he walks the corridors as a concealed blade. But the castle is stubbornly ordinary in its magic. Shared essays with Hermione in the library, late-night chess with Ron in a common room that smells of smoke and old stone. A professor who pauses after class to ask if he is sleeping and means it. These small, almost trivial acts do something years of indoctrination could not. They offer him a reference point outside the Dark Lord's voice. Lily was a charms prodigy, but in this story, her greatest magic is absent. Harry has no mother's love to anchor him. Instead, he must grow his own. Not Dumbledore, who had once believed he could position a boy with the Dursleys and let love do the rest. Not Hagrid, who had once broken down a door to deliver a letter and a birthday cake. Not Sirius, who had once offered escape on a hippogriff. None of them are there at the beginning. They arrive late, flawed, bearing their own plans for him. And here, the ethics sharpen. Voldemort shapes Harry for conquest and cannot imagine him refusing. Dumbledore, in this altered war, still shapes, still guides, still withholds. But when the final choice comes, when Harry stands between the man who raised him and the man who finally told him the whole truth, only one of them is willing to lose. Only one can say, if you walk away from my war, you are still yourself, and you are still worthy of being alive. The most terrifying and hopeful thing about this Harry is the same. No matter how carefully he is constructed as a weapon, he retains the power to say no. To prophecy, to abuse, to the stories others speak over his name. The grave of the boy Voldemort thought he owned is empty. What rises in his place is someone neither Dark Lord nor Headmaster entirely understands, and the next choice he makes will remake their world. The grave was empty, and now the film in your mind has to decide what rises in its place. Not just in plot, but in image, in tone, in the way the camera would dare to look at this Harry, and at the man who calls himself his father. Begin where the story curdles, the nursery. Not bright toys and fluttering mobiles, but a room half in shadow, lit by a single cold wand tip that never quite warms. A crib that feels more like a cage. Voldemort at the threshold, his silhouette long and skeletal against stone, studying the child the way one studies a weapon under construction. This is important. Every rattle is a training implement. Every whispered word a lesson in fear, in power, in the inevitability of his plan. Then Hogwarts, but not the Hogwarts you remember. The Sorting Hat lowered over Harry's head in a hall that feels just a little too vast. The candles dimmer, the ceiling storm-heavy. The hat hesitates, lingers. It hears the echo of a dark lord in the boy's thoughts, and the stubborn, inexplicable tenderness that refuses to die. The camera stays close on Harry's face, on eyes that are a little too old for 11, flinching not at cruelty, but at kindness he has been taught to distrust. The colour palette throughout cools, greens that edge toward sickly, blues that verge on bruises, skin tones washed by torchlight instead of sun. The score leans away from triumph and into tragic awe, low strings and choral fragments that sound almost like mourning. Even Quidditch is shot from a distance, as if the magic of flight cannot quite reach him. Performances shift. Voldemort does not always hiss. Sometimes he softens, voice almost gentle as he calls Harry, "My boy," and that is when he is most terrifying. Dumbledore's twinkle appears, but the camera catches the moment it dies. The regret that settles in its place when he realizes what has been done to this child. Not Dumbledore, who had always believed in second chances, ever imagined this. Not Hagrid, who had once carried a baby from a ruined house and now sees that same boy walk beside the man who ruined it. Not Sirius, who had planned a godfather's laughter and instead finds a stranger behind Harry's eyes. Imagine the graveyard revelation, the truth about Lily's last words given not as a comfort, but as a fracture. Lily was a charms prodigy, and her magic of protection was never meant to be twisted into a brand of ownership. The forest walk becomes almost unbearable. Harry moving through silvered trees, torn between the father who raised him and the mother he never knew. The score thinning to a single trembling note as he chooses. When he returns from King's Cross, he is not simply coming back to finish a battle. He is returning to defy the entire design of his life. Which moment breaks you? The first time he calls Voldemort father without flinching. The first time he cannot say it? Or the final duel in the Great Hall where cooler light falls on 2 men and 1 boy, and the camera understands that the most powerful magic here is not a curse, but a refusal. In this darker cinema, the alternate universe stops being a mere thought experiment and becomes a way of feeling the original story differently, of seeing how fragile and how immense one boy's choices truly are. Because when the dust settles and the replicas of prophecy and plan lie shattered, the question that remains is simple and terrible. What exactly does Harry Potter choose to save? What Harry chooses to save is not only a world, it is himself. And in that choice, this alternate universe stops being safely distant and begins to feel uncomfortably near. Because very few people are raised by Dark Lords, yet many are raised inside dark plans. This is important. Families, schools, churches, nations, all can become intricate architectures of control, built by people who believe they know what you must be and what you must destroy, in order for their story to come true. Voldemort, in this telling, is only the most literal version of something far more common. The parent who treats a child as a weapon, a symbol, a replica of their own unfinished war. He rewrites prophecy into a script. He calls it destiny. He calls it protection. he calls it love. But the boy inside the script is not asked who he wishes to be. Not Dumbledore, who had once believed that love could conquer anything, is innocent of this pattern. He too has a plan. He too looks at a child and sees a possible end to a grave and grinding conflict. The difference in this universe is not that Voldemort uses Harry and Dumbledore does not. The difference is which kind of control each man believes is justified. The viewer understands this because many of them have lived it, perhaps not with wands and curses, but with expectations that feel just as binding as any charm. The child who must become the doctor to redeem a family's sacrifice. The believer who must never question the doctrine that kept their elders safe. The quiet one who must stay quiet, because the family only survives if nobody makes a scene. In Voldemort's fortress nursery, Harry learns a language of fear, of conditional affection, of praise given when he obeys and withdrawn when he hesitates. He is taught a single story: Dumbledore as tyrant, resistance as treason, mercy as weakness. Yet the magic that matters most in him does not quite bend. It flickers in small acts of defiance, a question he should not ask, a classmate he should not spare, a friendship he should not form. These are the moments that matter. When he listens to Hermione's relentless search for truth and feels something shift. When Ron's loyalty offers him a version of family that is not purchased with terror. When even Snape, torn and bitter, lets slip a perspective that does not match the Dark Lord's script. Harry begins to do the most dangerous thing any controlled child can do. He compares stories. Where then does this touch the Watcher's own life? Perhaps in the sudden recognition that they too have been living inside someone else's prophecy. That the role they perform at work, at home, in their community, was written long before they were old enough to refuse it. The pattern interrupt may be as small as a private thought. What if they are wrong about me? From there, defiance need not look like open rebellion. Sometimes it is seeking a second opinion. Sometimes it is choosing a different friend. Sometimes it is walking away from power offered on terms that would require you to vanish yourself. The grave was empty in Godric's Hollow. The boy was still alive. In this darker line of time, the deeper miracle is that the self inside Harry remains alive as well, bruised but not extinguished. If a child raised by Voldemort can learn to choose love over usefulness, truth over comfort, and selfhood over prophecy, then perhaps the roles we inherited are not as final as they seemed. The script can be broken, the wand can be lowered, and the next choice, however small, can belong to you. Tonight, we arrive where all dark stories eventually lead. Not at certainty, at choice. We have walked through a world in which Voldemort does not leave a baby in the rubble, but carries him away from the grave as a prize. The grave was empty. This is important, because in this telling, the boy who lived is not a rescued orphan. He is a crafted weapon, raised in shadowed halls and whispered ideology, taught that Dumbledore is the tyrant and that mercy is a flaw. Across these scenes, one pattern has held: Harry pushing, slowly, painfully, against the shape that was carved for him. Each mission at Hogwarts, each encounter with Ron and Hermione, each moment when his wand shakes instead of striking, becomes another crack in Voldemort's careful plan. By the end, the prophecy has not changed, but the boy inside it has. He chooses. He breaks from the hand that forged him. And the war reshapes around that single refusal. Now, the story is yours to pull apart. If this Harry stepped onto the Hogwarts Express with the Dark Lord's instructions in his mind, where would the hat have sent him? Does a boy trained for precision and obedience belong in Slytherin? Or does the hat glimpse a buried loyalty and send him to Gryffindor anyway, placing a serpent's prodigy among lions? Perhaps Ravenclaw tempts him with the promise of understanding the magic that ruined his life. You knew the houses in canon. Which one bears the weight of this version of him? Consider the fracture point. When does he truly begin to turn? Is it the first time he sees Dumbledore look at him not as a threat, but as a child? Not Dumbledore, who had every reason to fear him, and yet offers a second chance. Not Hagrid, who had lost so much to Voldemort's cruelty, and still presses a clumsy, honest gift into Harry's hands. Not Sirius, who had been branded traitor and weapon alike, and recognizes the haunted look in his godson's eyes. At which of these moments does indoctrination begin to fail? There is also the quieter question of Dumbledore's responsibility. Should he have done more to pull Harry away, or less, trusting the boy to find his own center? If a child has been shaped as a replica of his enemy's will, when does he stop being only a victim and begin to answer for his own choices? Is he still the chosen one if half his life is spent spilling the wrong blood? In the comments, write the scene you most want to see fully rendered. The first night Harry calls Voldemort Father. The sorting that could have gone another way. The final confrontation where he lowers his wand and refuses both masters. Or carry it forward. How does the next generation grow up in a world where the Saviour was once the Dark Lord's favoured son? If this darker, more tragic telling made you see the original story differently, let that be your signal. Like the video, so this version of Harry does not vanish back into silence. Subscribe for more deep, careful descents into wizarding worlds that might have been. And share this with someone who thinks they know Harry Potter, until they meet the boy Voldemort tried to raise as his perfect weapon.